Good evening. My name's Bob Connors. It's 7:01 p.m. I'd like to call the March 21st meeting of the Newbury Conservation Commission to order. Sam, can you read the remote open meeting law preamble and take a roll call vote of the members present?
Yes.
Do it slowly, Sam. Do it slowly.
Very slowly. All right. As a preliminary matter, my name is Samantha Holt, Town Staff Conservation Agent for the Newbury Conservation Commission. Permit me to confirm that all members are present and can hear me. Conservation Commission members, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Bob Connors.
Yes.
All right. We do not have Brad Duffin tonight. Diane O'Brien.
Yeah.
Mary Rimmer. It's right there.
Here.
Peter Pecos.
Yes.
And TJ Conti.
Here.
All right. Good evening. This March 21st, 2023 open meeting of the Newbury Conservation Commission is being conducted remotely, consistent with the act relative to extending certain COVID-19 measures adopted during the state of emergency, which extends the governor's March 12th, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law until March 31st, 2023. This order suspends the requirement of the open meeting law to have all meetings in a publicly accessible physical location and allows public bodies to meet entirely remotely, so long as reasonable public access is afforded so that the public can follow along with the deliberations of the meeting. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and that attendees are participating by video and/or telephone conference, and the recording will be available on the Newbury Access YouTube channel. Meeting materials were provided to the commission members prior to the meeting for review and were posted to the Conservation Commission webpage for public access. Before we turn to the first item on the agenda, permit me to cover some ground rules for effective and clear conduct of our business and to ensure accurate meeting minutes. The chair will introduce each speaker on the agenda. Proponents will be given 10 minutes to present. More time may be allowed at the discretion of the chair. After they conclude their remarks, we will go down the list of commission members, inviting each by name to provide any comment, questions, or motions. Please hold until your name is called. Further, for all attendees except commission members and staff, please remember to mute your computer using the mute button or your phone using *6 to toggle mute and unmute when you are not speaking. Please remember to speak clearly and in a way that helps generate accurate minutes. Please be aware that video participants can see you and that you should take care not to screen share your computer unless you have been allowed to do so. Anything that you broadcast may be captured by the recording. For any responses, please wait until the floor is yielded to you and state your name before speaking. If commission members wish to engage in discussion with other members, please do so through the chair, taking care to identify yourself when you wish to speak. There will be an opportunity for public comment and questions during public hearings. After commission members have spoken, we will afford the public an opportunity to comment and/or ask questions as follows. I will seek questions and comments at the appropriate time through the Zoom raised hand function. For video conference participants, to raise your hand, hover over the bottom of the Zoom window below the photo gallery and click on the yellow hand that appears. If you don't see a yellow hand, click on the participants button. The list of participants will open and display on the right. At the bottom of this participant area, you will see an option to click on a raised hand button. Please ensure your name is fully and correctly displayed on the participant list. You may rename yourself using the More function next to your name. For telephone participants, to raise your hand in a Zoom meeting, hit *9 on your phone's keypad. We will then allow questions and comments from members of the public who have raised their hands in the order in which they appear listed on my screen based on when the function was selected. Each participant will be called upon to provide his or her name and address or affiliation, and will be afforded 3 minutes to make comments. More time may be allowed at the discretion of the chair. The proponent and commission members will have the opportunity to reply as needed. Your hand will be lowered when you've been given the floor for your questions. We will then continue down the list of those in the raised hand column and again afford time for responses as needed. All participants are reminded that only matters which fall into the jurisdiction of the Conservation Commission may be discussed. The chat feature has been disabled for this meeting. Everyone is expected to conduct themselves in the same manner they would at an in-person meeting. Disruptions that impede operations of this commission will be addressed once by the chair and should be acknowledged by the disruptor. Further disruptions may result in complete removal from the meeting with no readmittance. Vulgar or obscene actions or comments will result in immediate removal from the meeting with no readmittance. And finally, each vote taken in this meeting will be conducted by a roll call vote.
Well, thank you, Sam. All right, upcoming meeting dates. We have a meeting coming up on April 4th and April 18th. I do have a reminder that we may be returning in person beginning April 1st, but it looks like the legislature is going to resolve that.
And hopefully we will hear before next Thursday when I have to have the agenda posted. If I don't hear by the time I'm going to wait as long as I can to post the agenda. if I don't hear before it gets posted, we will have to post as an in-person meeting. And even if it does change after that, unfortunately, we can't change the location that late. Once it gets posted, I believe we have to stick with that, but I can confirm that with town council to make sure.
I say we post 2 meetings. We post in person or
I think
we
we've
cancel one,
we've
but-
tried to discuss that with her, and she has advised against that. But I will definitely check in with her and see
Okay.
what that case is before we
All
get.
right. All right, good evening, everyone. So the first matter before the commission, meeting minutes, approval of the meeting minutes for February 21st and March 7th. Team, we're gonna vote these separately because I have to abstain from the March 7th because I wasn't present. So why don't we take a moment and review the February 21st meeting minutes? Is there any
I
question,
had
comments?
two minor comments. Sam, on 68 Green Street, the second to the last line says any vegetation remaining shall be flagged using a different color. I think you mean to say any vegetation to be saved.
Yes.
Okay. And then one other item on 19 Exeter Way, I thought we had included a special condition, and maybe not because it's already gone out, that it would be that you'd be notified prior to the work starting.
I don't think that,
Okay,
I don't remember discussing that.
it's gone out now anyway. Right?
Yeah.
Okay, it's a sort of moot. Thanks. That's all I had.
Okay, is there a motion to approve the February 21st minute meetings as amended by Mary's suggestion?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, roll call vote. All in favor, say aye. Mary,
Yes.
TJ,
Aye.
Pete,
I'll be abstaining.
okay, Diane,
Yes.
and Bob Connors votes yes. All right, now on the March 7th, 2023 minutes. One, Mary, you now set the record for the shortest meeting, I think, in the history of the Conservation Commission. So
Proud moment.
you're always, you're a tough act to follow, Mary, that's all I can say.
Helps
We're
know there's
already,
something on the
we're already
agenda.
past it now.
If everyone would just withdraw their applications tonight, it'd
I-
be really done really quickly too. Yeah.
Team, why don't we take a look at those and see if there's any comments, concerns, or corrections that, as there's really nothing on that. All right, do we have a motion to approve the March 7th meeting minutes?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, all those in favor vote yes. Mary,
Yes.
TJ,
Aye.
Pete, you were with me, so I know you weren't there.
Correct.
Brad's not here, Diane,
Yes.
and the chair abstains. All right. Okay, it's well beyond 7 o'clock. I've already blown Mary's, didn't even get close to beating Mary's record on my first matter of business here. All right, so we have a certificate of compliance for 92 Hanover Street, lot 43A, for work to construct a 42 by 68 Morton steel building with associated site work. Sam, can you provide a project overview and a recommendation on this matter?
Yes, so unfortunately, this file appears to be one of the ones that had fallen victim to our flooding issue, so we don't have a hard copy file. And the only record that we actually have of anything is the recorded order of conditions, which is actually one of the most thorough 1980s order of conditions that I have seen since I started. It actually had a description of the project in it, which was fantastic. However, we didn't have any plans. I did have some schematics that I found in the building file, but nothing really substantial that was going to help a whole lot. I did go out to the site last Tuesday and took a look at everything. It appears that based off of what limited information we had in the order conditions, that the project was completed appropriately. So my recommendation would be a complete certificate.
Okay, thank you, Sam. All right, questions from the members. Mary, any questions on this one?
No, it doesn't really leave us very much information, and I assume the minutes aren't available either from the meetings. Yeah.
Okay.
Um,
All right, Pete, any comments or questions?
No,
TJ,
None. Nope.
Diane?
No, I'm gonna go with Sam on this one.
Yeah, no, I don't have any questions either. All right, is there a motion to issue a certificate of compliance for 92 Hanover Street, also known as Lot 43A?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
second,
Second,
Okay, I'll roll call vote. All in favor, say aye. Mary,
Yes.
TJ,
Aye.
Pete,
yes.
Diane,
yes.
and Bob Connors votes yes. All right. All right, 7 p.m. We're past that. Enforcement order, file number 418, 20 Northern Boulevard, administrative enforcement order issued for violation of negative determination of applicability for second floor deck expansion and reconfiguration of the roof line. Sam, can you provide an overview on this matter?
Yes, so you guys might remember this one coming in last month. We discussed this on February 7th. The negative determination was issued on the 9th. And it was intended to just be for the second story. The extent of the work was intended to just be removal of the second story walls to reconfigure the roof line and to expand the deck, basically to wrap around the right side of the house and match up with the first floor deck that's already existing. We got a call last Monday that the house was mostly taken down to the foundation. There are some portions of the first story wall that are still there. And I can pull up the pictures in just a second for everyone to see. An enforcement order, an administrative enforcement order was issued to the contractor that was on site. I believe it was Daryl from Boston North was out there on Monday. And the building commissioner and I both went out and pretty much just told them to stop until we get everything figured out. Long story short, from the building and zoning side, they are pretty much all set. The only real procedural stuff that needs to be dealt with is on the commission side. I did get an email confirmation from the building commissioner today confirming that they have not triggered substantial improvement and therefore they do not need to go up on pilings. And all of the information for that, the email from Peter, as well as some information about the appraisal and the cost breakdown for the permit, are all included in the Dropbox for you guys. So basically at this point, we kind of have two things that we need to deal with. The enforcement order, which would mainly just require any mitigation or restoration as needed for any disturbance that was caused. And after that, we also need to figure out how the applicant is going to move forward. This isn't really something, it would be very difficult to do a modification to the original determination. This isn't really something that would get covered under that. So really the two options would be either have them file a new RDA for the work that's actually being done to cover that full scope, or go with a full notice of intent. I did speak with the applicant and his contractor, who are both here. Jody Latimer is the applicant, Ben Perez is the contractor from Boston North. I spoke with them yesterday, and essentially the way that I've kind of looked at it is that if what they had done currently is what was presented to me initially, I would have advised them to go with a notice of intent rather than an RDA. So I guess take that as you will and run with that as you will.
Okay.
But
So
from,
a couple of questions, Sam. Can you put up Peter's letter? I think I saw it in the job box.
hold on a second. Make sure that's actually going to come up first. Figure out which screen it's on. Here we go. All right. Oh, there you go. Go on. All right, can we see that?
Yeah, so Peter has determined that the 50-50 rule does not apply and that there is no further return to zoning for any modification. Because all of the dimension, exterior cuts, elevations will remain the same as approved.
Right, so the reconstruction of the house that's gonna go up is the original architectural plans that we got. The house is going to essentially be reconstructed in the same fashion, the same way that it was originally approved, just starting from basically the ground up rather than from the second floor up.
Okay,
Or the
why
first.
don't I stop there and let's go around and get some questions from the members. Mary, what are your thoughts on this one?
Well, I have a bunch of questions, but I think it might be helpful to hear from the builder or the applicant a little bit on this. I mean, how this came to be and what their intention is. I have a bunch of questions about this 50-50 rule, but I think that understanding how we got here from their point of view might be helpful.
Okay, why don't we, who wants to speak for the applicant? Is it Ben?
This is Jody Latimer. I'm the owner at 20 Northern. So I think we'll start with Ben Perez, who is the builder, and then I'll add something in a bit.
Okay, Ben, I don't see Ben on the screen unless he is.
I'm
Okay.
here if you can hear
Yeah,
me.
yeah, Ben, just identify yourself, name, address, and
Yes,
what your
good evening.
position
This
is.
is Ben Perez. I am the general contractor and owner of Boston North Development. So the project, we submitted our RDA application, but a little over a month ago now, with plans that clearly depicted the work that we were going to be doing. The only deviation from our description of the project was the walls on the first floor were beyond repair and they were deemed best to be replaced versus repaired. This decision was made by me, the decision that I've been later informed that was a bad decision to make without informing the inspector first. But the intention was not, my intention was not to cause any harm or do any damage to the surrounding dunes in doing so, which I don't feel we did. But Peter brought up a good point. How does this trigger the 50% rule? And I explained to Peter that the cost of doing that additional work is actually the same, or believe it or not, less expensive than repairs and modifications to something that's in bad shape. So that was clearly understood by Peter, and we're here now, and we're hoping we can proceed with construction.
Okay, do you have I think, Sam, one of the questions as I recall, at the original, the hearing, was the limitation of where materials and parking would be limited to. And it was to be to the front parking area. And as I do recall, the applicant did mention that they had parking on the left-hand side of the house. Do we have any pictures of that, Sam, in the file?
And I can add a little to that. So
Yeah,
when
Jody, please wait until you're asked to speak. Sam, do you have any pictures?
There's a photo in the appraisal Car
Do you
parking
want
on
to, do you
the
want to see the
register?
picture of it before or?
Yes, just to
Okay.
see what existed before.
I can actually, give me 1 second because I have that pulled up. Um, All right, can you guys see that?
Yes,
So this is the Google Street View. Ben, this is actually the same picture basically that you gave me yesterday, except I just have it live up on Google. This is, this actually, the image capture says it's from 2019, but it is essentially the same thing right now. This is a little bit more covered in sand now than it was then. But you can very clearly see, I went and, kicked some sand around on it this afternoon just to check and make sure that it was still there. And it's very clear that there is still gravel under there. It's the sand has just sort of migrated as it does.
So
Um,
Sam, the dumpster was located in what location?
Right in here, if you can see my cursor.
Okay.
This propane tank is not there anymore. This was removed sometime in 2020. The dumpster was right in here. Currently, there's some sort of like temporary wooden fencing that's kind of blocking off this corner. So the dumpster was right in this area. It does look like there was some vegetation that may have gotten ripped up possibly from underneath here. It's a very small patch. But it looks like there has been a little bit back here, sort of back towards the end.
And where was the lumber stored? That
The lumber storage was over in this area. I went out there today just to check on a few things, and most of the materials that were out there are either stored up on this deck or on the deck out back. There is still quite a bit of material that's out on the vegetation down here, that's still on the ground, and the vegetation on this side is pretty well trampled at this point.
okay, so
kind
from a resource area, the impacts you're talking about is in that dune area regarding the condition of the existing dune grass. And then
Yeah.
back on the left side, the back end of that particular parking area.
Yeah, so mostly like right here on this, what would, looking from the street would be the right-hand side. That extends maybe 4 or 5 feet off the edge of the deck. And then a narrower path around the backside where the vegetation again has been pretty well trampled. That's typically to be expected. For the most part, it would likely naturally come back, at least on the backside. On this right-hand side, it looks like it might have a tougher time, especially if the material stays there for very long. But yeah, just mostly kind of right around the perimeter of the house,
Okay.
within 3 to 5 feet out.
Okay, thank you, Sam. Mary, do you have any other questions for Ben?
Well, I think maybe we should be looking at the current photos, if you have any current photos of
Thank you.
what it looks like since it's been taken down. And so the propane tank is removed and we don't need new propane. Is that correct?
Bob, can I take a minute to speak?
Yeah, I mean, Ben's answering the questions. One of you is going to answer the questions.
Yeah.
So is it going to be you, Jody, or Ben?
I'll answer that question. That there's a current two propane tanks on the right-hand side with your back to the street, which are in place. They were in place previous to me starting construction, and they are still currently in place, and they're going to remain there.
Okay, so
And-
there's no plans to increase the size or change them out or anything like that.
We don't, no, there is no need to. Nope.
Okay, so what our issue is obviously that, going from what was described in the determination of applicability was, some roof reconfiguration and second floor work that was all going to be done interior from the building to a project which has new first floor walls and it's going to require all new siding and all new exterior work and potentially scaffolding and everything else around the building to construct this. So even without the equipment storage, lumber storage that's already occurred, we can reasonably anticipate that there's going to be some need to do some more exterior work that is going to be work on the dune. And so yeah, it would have made sense if that was the case and we knew it ahead of time that it would have been a notice of intent. And I think there's still potential for additional impacts to the dune in order to construct this. So that's sort of where I'm coming from at this point.
Okay. Let's move on with Pete. Do you have any questions at this time?
Yeah, it looks like this is kind of a fluid project. And I think having better definition of what is supposed to be the outcome will help the commission to determine what should have been in place and then where to go.
Okay, thank you, Pete. All right, TJ, what are your thoughts on this one?
Well, I agree that we need to know what the, final plans are so that we know if there's going to be any more impact to the resource area. I do have a procedural question as to, self-admittedly, Ben didn't ask the question when he found the wall was structurally unsound. If he had gone back and pulled the permit for that and they included in that, would they have had to have come back to the Conservation Committee because they changed their permit, or would that have just taken care of that?
So if they, and I actually had the same conversation with Ben and Jody. Basically, if they had come in immediately when they realized that the first floor walls were going to come down, it would have been the exact same process, except we would have skipped over the enforcement issue part and gone straight to, having them come in, discuss it with you guys, try to figure out how they need to move forward, what they needed to do. We'd be in the same boat, just would have skipped over the cease and desist part.
Okay, good.
Diane, any questions?
Just a couple. So Sam, so procedurally, would we be able to go forward with the enforcement order that contains all of the future conditions, or would it have to be an NOI?
So for if the commission determines that restoration is necessary, then DEP prefers to have restoration that's, restoration required as a result of enforcement to be covered in an enforcement order, because the enforcement order mandates versus an order of conditions which allows. So I would say that any restoration the commission believes is necessary should be covered under an enforcement order. And then whatever procedure you'd like them to go through, whether it be an RDA or notice of intent for the current scope of work, that can get covered alone under the application, basically.
Sam, can you pull up the original RDA or the
Yes.
negative finding?
Like the actual document?
Yeah, right,
Yes.
what was approved and recorded? If you could blow that up.
So this was the
Can you expand that a little bit, Sam? Just to
Yes,
make it a
sorry
little
about that.
easier to read. Okay, great, thank you.
So this is the specific language that was put as the project description: expansion of existing second floor deck to match dimensions of first floor deck, reconfigure existing roof line with slight upward expansion. So
Maybe you
obviously
can you-
nothing to do with the first floor.
Can you go all the way down? It was another, where is it? There was one we checked the box number 2, stop it right there. So what's that say there?
So this is the -2 determination, which indicates that the work described in the request is within an area subject to protection under the act, but will not remove, fill, dredge, or alter that area. Therefore, said work does not require filing of a notice of intent.
Okay, so I guess the question is, are we filling, dredging, or altering the area beyond? Now let's go back to the original plans.
So,
I mean, it's basically showing
is
us a brand new house with siding and windows.
so this was the original existing house. And this is what it ultimately will end up looking like this again, once it's fully built. Just the means of getting there has changed slightly.
Okay.
And
So-
I think it's also worth noting as well that we also have, the floodplain resource area to consider. This isn't a velocity zone, fully within the velocity zone. And it's also, which is more triggered by the whole substantial improvement deal. But it's also and I can pull up Mass Mapper if anybody would like to see it.
Well, but I think Sam, Peter, who is the zoning and code enforcement officer for the town of Newbury, not the commission, has made a determination on that.
Right,
that's-
yeah,
That's within his jurisdiction. Now,
right.
so I have a question for Ben. Ben, are you
Yep, I'm
available?
listening. I am available, yes.
So Ben, the exterior elevations, all of the siding, all of the roof, all of the windows were going to always be brand new. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yes,
And the issues that we're looking at is the removal of existing interior lumber, being the exterior perimeter walls.
that's correct, yes.
Okay.
And to add to that, the work to be done to the siding and the windows and the majority of the framing, we have two-story decks on two of the major dune sides of the building. The rear being the ocean, or the front being the ocean side. The right side, which you can see in the image here, is the side that was closest to the beach, the dune. And then the left side, which is where the driveway would be. And then the street side. So 3 of the 4 sides have either a deck or are a gravelled surface, the 4th side being that driveway where the dumpster was. So there's very little area that we'd actually be sanding on a dune or near a dune to do the work.
Mr. Chair, I
Okay.
still had a question about.
Yeah, go ahead,
the
Diane. I'm gonna
the
go around
side-
again here.
On the left there, where the dumpster was. I mean, I've been by there and I saw Sam's picture from 219, which it looks a little bit different now. It looks more sandy now than it did then. And there's a shower back there. Was a shower is that part of this build, or was it permitted, or was it okayed by conservation previously?
I can answer
That-
that.
It has been there. That's not new. It was previously existing.
But was it built, like, it had to be recent, right? That was all, that went through conservation, Sam, do you recall?
I'm
The
not-
appraisal said that it was redone. Or it was either new or redone in 2020 when the appraisal, since the
So-
property owner took the property.
That shower was installed before we purchased the home, the old owners.
Okay.
Have
Was,
improvements been made to it since then?
I'm sorry?
Were improvements made to it since then?
Some inside painting and this and that. But no major improvements. We did add a stairwell, which we got which there was a permit for, from the basement going up to the first floor. And there was a permit for that, and that's filed.
in the shower that well, that was, you think that was permitted prior to your purchasing?
Well, it was there when we purchased the home. And if I just make a note, the pictures that Sam showed were almost 4 years ago. We have current pictures because that area does look different. Both sides of the home. Again, that's a Google Maps from 2019. It does not show the current view of the home. But Sam has all those pictures.
Yeah, and she had posted those. It actually looks more like a dune now than it did then.
Yeah, I think the
so I don't know that that
2019
helps.
picture, the 2019 picture actually helps your case better, Jody, because it shows gravel in place.
Well, there's still gravel there, Bob.
No, as Sam did admit.
Because then on the plan that you had submitted, it has the parking. It looks like the parking and gravel is only in the front of the property. Is that correct?
That's incorrect. So there is parking, and there's always been parking there on the side of the house. And when I asked back in the meeting, I basically requested to put the dumpster on the side of the house where we put it. The reason being that the old owners, when they did some of their work, that's where they put it. And that's what they told me. One of the things that we're, just so you're aware, if and when this project gets moving forward, the dumpster will then be moved to the front of the home, where we have obviously multiple parking spaces. And I've also secured my next door neighbor, Steve DeSalvo, is giving us all of his parking for Ben's group, for some of his guys, for their cars, et cetera. So we'll have additional spaces out front, and we will not be utilizing that side for the dumpster. That was my mistake. I requested that initially, and obviously it was, even though Ben put snow fence around it, when he put the dumpster in, it obviously it did not, service the needs.
Sam, could you call up the site plan? Because I'm just thinking moving forward, what's going to be parking and what isn't? Because I don't see, maybe I just missed it, but I'm not seeing the parking on the side of the property here.
So that parking is in,
Do you want to like zoom in on it? Because there's a spot, the front of it, it says gravel parking area, but it doesn't go up the side.
What's the date of this plan?
this is from 2022, August
Okay.
2022.
And the photo, the Google photo was 2019,
Right, yeah,
showing gravel and actually,
then
when I did Google Earth, it shows cars parking there.
That's a current picture.
right. This was
That's a
from
current picture
yesterday.
there.
So
Okay.
moving forward, that's not a parking space?
No, well, we use it as parking, front to back. And that's where the dumpster was. And then what I'm saying is that when we move forward, that we will not put the dumpster there because there's a bigger space out front between the home and the street.
I'm not even, I'm concerned with the dumpster, but I'm thinking just as part of your plan moving forward, you're saying that you park there front to back. But if we're saying that's a dune, has that been designated as parking spots?
People have been parking there for 20 years. So I don't know
Because
what,
there's other
I
people
don't know
on
what
Northern
changed.
Boulevard that are, needing to put spots in there. I'm just kind of curious.
I'm not
If
parking.
that's, I guess I'm putting it out to the commission.
So I think the value of that 2019 plan show that it's been used as parking, and that's 4 years ago. And Jody, how long have you owned this property? Couple of years?
Two and a half.
Yeah. So 3 years have gone by anyway, Diane and Mary, what is it? The doctrine of repose on a matter like that? Forget what the legal term is.
Well, there's a statute of limitations, but if it's ongoing activity, then it's an ongoing violation.
Well,
but-
it's
It's a 3-year from
Right.
transfer of ownership is what you're
Right.
looking at. They're responsible for it
So-
for a previous owner. I guess I'm struggling, if I can just interject here now for a minute, Bob, that I didn't fully appreciate the amount of work that was proposed on this originally. That wasn't really explained very well at the hearing, from what I recall. I didn't realize there was other exterior work that was proposed, windows and doors and things. That wasn't spelled out very carefully in the request for determination. This is a unique situation where you're still building within the same building footprint, although you are on a coastal dune. It just raises a bunch of questions about whether or not the whole foundation system can be evaluated under a coastal dune performance standards as part of a notice of intent, or whether it should. You're in a velocity zone, you've got a pathway right next to the house, this is a high risk area for sure. And building a new house on a cinder block foundation in a velocity zone makes no sense to me right now in this current environment. So I don't really fully understand why they would want to, at this point, not, now that you're down to the foundation, not make improvements to make your property more resilient for the long term. But if that's not before us, that's not before us. I just think that it's short-sighted not to be looking at that at this point. I think that a notice of intent would give us the opportunity to, I don't see that there's a lot of opportunity. There's a lot of need for restoration right now. I think the restoration needs to happen when work is completed, frankly, because there may be additional impact. But upon completion, with a notice of intent, we can provide, require conditions that certain areas be revegetated. Not to take away all of your parking, but certain areas that are impacted during construction and additional areas that maybe shouldn't have been impacted at all over the years. We can capture all that as part of a notice of intent. It's just a bigger project than what was originally anticipated.
It is what we said.
So we're regulating not just whether there was an impact, but what the potential is for impact for your future construction. And I would think we'd all agree that for new home construction, that there's a higher potential for impact.
So Mary, the question I have is, I know when we were talking to Lisa, that it came down to that the trigger for an NOI wasn't going to be, unless the 50-50 rule was triggered and we were going to have the removal of a foundation and installation of piles. Then we get into altering, filling, cutting, I guess you wouldn't call it dredging of the lot. But it was the restoration was going to, if there was a restoration that we deemed was necessary based on the encroachment into the resource area outside the footprint, that would require an NOI. But I think the whole Courtney Lane, Courtney Drive, which is the next matter before us, the department came back and actually was telling us to remove that restoration out of the NOI because we'd have more control. We could set the time limit. We could set far more conditions with an enforcement order, where that we could pretty much have it with ongoing inspections 12 months after construction is done to make sure that any of the resource that has been impacted and hasn't recovered naturally has to be restored.
Yeah, but we
I mean,
can't authorize new construction under an enforcement order. So we can only authorize restoration, and I see that there's a huge pressing need for restoration right now. But I do see that there's a need that that the work is beyond the scope of the original determination, and therefore a notice of intent is needed because the work has higher potential for impact. That's how I would have framed it. But
yeah, again, you know what, we did have a pretty detailed exchange with town council, and it was, we're all in separate lanes here where our job is to supervise and within the resource area being the land, and it's Peter and the zoning enforcement officers for the structure. And where there is no outward expansion beyond the existing footprint, which we all agree is grandfathered by right because it is existing. I'm just struggling with, I just think that DEP's latest guidance on our very next matter tonight tells us that we should be doing this restoration and making sure, I forget the exact wording of it. But I thought it was good guidance, and it was the latest thing we had available from the department as of Friday. So I'm going to stop there. Let's go around again to Pete. What are your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, there are three things now that I think I've gotten a little bit more I don't know if confusion or if I understand correctly, if an enforcement order is necessary, then that will trigger us into going to a notice of intent. Is that correct?
No, it's in lieu of a notice of
In
intent.
lieu, okay. all
And the
right.
department, the
Well,
department,
That's not how I would view it. I would direct them to file a notice of intent, but anyway, that was the
well,
issue.
it isn't automatic. What they said, Pete, on, can you pull up, actually, you know what, Sam, pull up the technical comments on 6 Courtney Drive. Because I'll be honest with you, before this came to our attention, and expand that, Sam. Now, 6 Courtney Lane, they have a after the fact restoration of restoring vegetation that they had removed 2,500 square feet. And this is coming into us next on a notice of intent. And Sam, why don't you just read the pertinent parts here?
So basically, the reason that they wanted that DEP.
But Sam, just read what they said. We don't need I'm curious what it says there. It says,
So it says that the NCC should not be permitting after the fact BBW alteration and work associated with the BBW restoration. Otherwise, the applicant is not compelled to restore the BBW and will have 3 years to perform restoration activities. It is Mass DEP's opinion that the NCC should handle this through an enforcement order with specific deadline dates to submit the restoration plan for review and approval by the NCC. Once approved, the NCC can issue an amended enforcement order that memorializes the restoration plan and includes a deadline date for completing the BBW restoration activities, long-term monitoring requirements, and deadline dates for submitting seasonal monitoring reports. So basically, an enforcement order mandates the restoration, whereas the order condition simply allows it, but it doesn't necessarily have to be completed.
whereas, as I read this, this actually gives the commission far more teeth where we can set milestones. And
Right.
then it's open-ended as to long-term monitoring, which can be, we could set that for 24 months after the project is complete.
Right.
And if there's a violation of the enforcement order, what is the fine structure on that, Sam?
I believe as far as fines go, under the bylaw doesn't
But under the
really
what
apply.
one?
So for DEP, I believe their fine structure is $300 per violation per day.
Okay. Now, I'm going to be honest, when I read this, and this came out, what was the date on this? Was what, last Friday?
This
when
was
they issued it?
Friday,
Yeah.
I think.
So this was after all of our kind of internal discussions on this.
Yep, but the
that-
difference here, and I think, Sam hit on it, Bob, is that this is to compel work that is required to be done to rectify a violation. We can't compel the construction of a house. That.
But how is
that's not
that?
the
I don't,
violation.
I guess I'm struggling with, if it's not going on pilings and it's an existing structure, how does it trigger altering, filling, dredging, which is our jurisdiction?
Mhm.
And what I'm looking at is, we have documentation that the resource has been impacted minimally. We don't know what the mid or long-term effects will be. And the stop work order or the enforcement order, we don't have jurisdiction over lumber. We really don't, if it's existing.
So, Bob,
That's,
What do you mean, we don't have jurisdiction over lumber?
we don't have jurisdiction over the existing structure. That's the
Oh,
building department. and
Within the
zoning.
structure itself, yeah.
Right, and if they change the foundation, absolutely. I mean, I think, and don't get me wrong, I think what we were thinking this project was when it came in and what it has become is different.
Yep.
But ultimately, what's the impact of the resource? Isn't that our job to determine that?
So Bob, that was kind of leading to a second question, and I don't know where we go with this. when someone wants to put up a fence, we have to make sure that there's, there's space underneath that fence so the dunes can
Right.
migrate as the dunes are going to migrate. And I see this as migrating dunes right now.
Okay,
And I think we've already indicated that from what it looked like a few years ago in Google to what it is now, the dune it's changing. So we know that it's changing. So where does that fall into this equation? And
so the 2 feet of freeboard on structures and fences, Pete,
Yep.
is governed by the state building code.
got it. No, I understand that. I understand that.
And
It's-
you know what it was? It was a policy of DEP, but it was competing with the state building code, and they got together and incorporated it into the code.
Right, right. So I understand that, Bob. It's the premise of the thing is changing. That's what happens with dune. They change, right? And so if we're seeing it change, do we say it should continue to change, or do we say, no, it's okay to continue to park there?
Yeah, I think I think the big thing we have to keep in mind is grandfathered rights that have been there and in use
Yep.
would not be allowed today if we were permitting this from scratch. But they do have a right to maintain existing structures and existing features.
Right,
Right.
I understand what you're saying, but Sam went out there and she said, you kick it around, you'll find gravel underneath there, but currently it's changing. So despite the, grandfathering, it is not what it was. So does that come to this conversation now that we're looking at this entire?
I think that it's certainly within our discussion and jurisdiction, talking about the resource. I think if we use the structure as a trigger, I think we're outside our lane, but
Well, I understand.
I think anything with the resource, Pete, and that's why I'm kind of leaning. And again, I'm just sharing my thoughts, that the enforcement order would certainly seem to have, based on the way DEP summarized this on a, after the fact submittal, with already in an NOI, and they're basically kicking it out of a notice of intent because they felt that it was, it had more teeth in an enforcement action.
I think that's apples to oranges because it's just such a different scenario. In that particular case where they're only asking for the restoration piece, not the rest of the construction to be part of the enforcement order. I mean, they're only asking for an enforcement order on that little piece of restoration, not the overall project.
But isn't the restoration, Mary, 2,500 square feet? And it's a small addition.
Decent size restoration, and I understand why they're separating that from what
Yeah.
a proposed new work. But that's not the scenario we have here. There's not a significant amount of restoration. I don't see that's
Mhm.
needed, but I do think that this work falls outside of the scope of an RDA. And that, I think an enforcement order that directs a notice of intent to be filed is our only play here.
And can I just throw out a couple points as well?
Sam,
related to
hang on,
that?
let me hear from the rest of the members first, though, and I'll circle back to you if that's okay. Okay, TJ, what are your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I mean, I'm very torn. This is a project, I do, like everybody else, agree that it probably is much more than was presented to us, or that we interpreted the presentation. And if maybe we probably would have required an NOI. However, if the dumpster and the lumber had been put in the garage and in front of the house on the driveway, I don't even think we'd be here right now. There would have been nothing that would have triggered conservation getting involved, because the rest of the matter was with the building inspector. So I'm trying to keep my mind separated to just the area that we have jurisdiction over. And I just don't see, it seems smaller to me that way than when I think about the whole project if it had come in front of me right now. So this may be just something that it got away from us, and we learned that we've got to get more information the first time, but I'm still battling in my own head on it.
You know, it's one of those things that we should create guidelines for where does the RDA stop? You know, is it, and again, there's been some discussion back and forth, but obviously at the intake point, if Sam has guidelines so that, you know, outside of ordinary repairs or extraordinary repairs to an existing structure, an existing feature, is one thing. But as you get into major renovations, you know, we may be doing everybody a favor at the very beginning of steering them through an NOI process. But there's nothing, the house is going to look exactly the same, guys, as what was submitted to us. How it's going to get there is different. Now, but that seems to have been resolved with the building inspector. So I'm looking at this from a jurisdiction of the resource only. And again, I believe that we have a right to maintain existing non-conforming features and structures. You know, it's by right. It's not by us saying so. It's by right. So, Diane, what are your thoughts on this?
I'm still, I don't know, I'm hung up on the whole left
Yeah.
side driveway issue, because if it's a driveway, then there's a lot less impact on the area if we take that as a driveway. If it's not a driveway, then the impact of parking cars there and using it as a driveway, if it's not supposed to be a driveway, and putting things on it has more of an effect. So I'm not convinced that it's a driveway. And I mean, they haven't been there 3 years. I don't know if it doesn't look as though it went before zoning as being a driveway. They don't have a driveway on their plan there. So it seems like if it's a driveway, the impact is not as much. If it's not a driveway, then the impact is more. So that's sort of what I'm looking at here.
So what's your thought? I mean, I think what's your thought on from a structure standpoint versus the resource standpoint?
I mean, I'd say you're absolutely correct in that the structure is going to be what the structure is. And if we could somehow use an enforcement order to say, you will not put any scaffolding in the dune area, you know, maybe one of the enforcements is, can we say that will not be used as a driveway unless it's permitted or, you know, to be a driveway, in which case then that could be part of the restoration area.
Okay.
And if that can be done with an enforcement order moving forward, based on the violation of the RDA, then maybe we accomplish the same goal. And then everyone can kind of get back to doing their work, but we would have conditions on that might not be acceptable to the homeowner.
What would they be?
I'm just
Jody,
asking out loud.
Jody, team, listen, everything goes through the chair. No one idle their responses to this meeting unless they've been recognized by the chair. So Sam, I want to circle back with you you had a couple of thoughts you wanted to add.
Yeah, so I guess the first thing, so in addition to several other resource types and jurisdictional areas, another thing that we also have to consider is the proximity of this particular structure to natural heritage priority habitat. I would be happy to pull up Mass Mapper and show you how close it is. But when I was looking at it before the RDA even came in, priority habitat goes right up to the edge of the house, if not into the house. So we are very close to priority habitat. We are also very quickly getting to shorebird nesting and breeding season. So there's a potential for natural heritage to be coming out and, you know, doing that monitoring that they do for shorebirds, coming out probably in the next 2 or 3 weeks and seeing this and not being happy about it, not being happy about not having had an opportunity to review the project. And I think another perhaps even bigger thing that we have to look at is, and we talk about it all the time, every project that we look at, every single thing that we approve has the potential to be precedent setting. As this project stands right now, this is not something that would have been covered under an RDA. Had this been the project that came in, like I said earlier, I would have advised them to do a notice of intent and go through that whole entire process. And it's something that's been mentioned by a couple people as well as myself that, you know, if other people are going to look at this and say, well, you know, I could go in and get a permit to do second-story renovations and then realize that my walls are no good, take them all down, and I'm not going to get in any trouble and I'll just be able to do whatever I want. No one's going to tell me otherwise, because that's what that guy got to do. He got away with it. So I'm going to get away with it and not tell anyone. This
Sam,
has the potential for being a precedent setting decision for this commission if this is allowed to go through not as a notice of intent for the work as it's currently being done.
so Sam, why was there no mention of natural heritage on the RDA? Did you review it back then?
I did review it back then, and the reason that it didn't, and I actually, originally when I was talking to Ben and his colleague Tony, when we were going through the process to figure out what kind of permit they were going to do, my initial thought with seeing upward expansion was do an NOI, and they would have to at least get in touch with Natural Heritage to see if they wanted to review it at a very, very baseline level. And it was upon further investigation and realization of what they were actually planning and the original minimal impact that it was going to have that I said, I think you guys can probably do this as an RDA, seeing as there's going to be very minimal ground impact. And because nothing would really be going into that natural heritage area. But again, the work that is currently being done, the scope that it's at right now, wouldn't have been covered under an RDA. I mean, we have people who do upward expansion. You know, I'm sure we all remember 80 Northern. They were trying to do upward expansion. He had to go through a notice of intent. He wasn't even as close to priority habitat, and he still had to file with them. So it, you know, basically if we let this slide through and don't, at a bare minimum, at least have them come in with a new RDA for the new scope of work, which I would be shocked if DEP saw that and didn't appeal it and have them do a notice of intent. They very well may not, but I would be surprised if they didn't. You know, we're looking at less impactful work that's had to go through notice of intent processes than this. And to not put this through the same, you know, put this under the same scope and under the same review process it's going to create problems in the future, because in the future, people are going to look at this project and say, they got away with it, why can't I? We're already getting questions about that right now. I've fielded multiple of them this week and last week. They got away with it, why can't we?
Well, I think each project, as we know, are separate and unique and have
Correct.
certain, everyone is different, everyone has its unique conditions. And I think the biggest dilemma here is establishing guidelines for future RDAs, so that there's no confusion on this. I had circulated some thoughts on that earlier today with Sam and Mary. But here we are. So, well, why don't we do this? Jody or Ben, you've heard, Ben, you get your hand up. Why don't you convince us what direction you'd like to see us go in. You've heard the varied opinions and concerns.
Yes, and after hearing what everybody's had to say, I think there's a little bit of you guys have a little slight variation on what ground to stand on, but my view of this project is the majority of the work that is being done now was always proposed to be done. So some of the verbiage in the initial application might not have been clear, but there was a set of plans submitted, which clearly showed the work to be done. And the application that we filled out and we were instructed to fill out is what we did. If we were told to do a notice of intent, we would have done that. I feel we're kind of being pushed back right now, kind of a little unjustly, that we should, maybe be penalized for anything we did to the dune. And I think if a restoration order is put in place that we have to do something like that, I could agree with that, but I don't think stopping the construction I feel is the right thing to do at this point.
Okay. Jody, do you have anything you want to add to the
Yeah,
discussion?
just to reiterate what Ben said, in late January, we presented this RDA. It was reviewed and by Sam, by the group, and it was passed. It was approved with all the plans. Ben said the plans have not changed, and they have not. There was a mistake made in portions of the wall. 40% of the walls are still up, so it's not like all the walls were down. And the most important wall is the one that's over the dune facing the water, and that has not been touched. And with decks on two sides, and the third side is the street level, and the other side is the open area where there was a propane tank 4 years ago, and now there's, where cars park there occasionally. Nothing has been disturbed yet. I think everything that's being discussed is potential. And I think we can do things. Ben can do things better in terms of making sure that that things are protected, whether it's daily looking, making sure that the area is clean. I've already basically got additional areas to park and to basically from my neighbor. So we can do things proactively. But again, we have not changed the scope of this. If we would have changed this, then I think we would have a problem, but nothing has changed here. Ben made a mistake by taking down a wall and a half, and he's paying for it, obviously, and I'm paying for it, but it wasn't done intentionally. It was a rotted out wall that most likely, and what the building inspector said, would have been replaced anyway because of the condition, and changing windows in a rotted wall would not work. So I personally have a hard time. This thing has been approved. And when we went in front of you, everyone had the plans and had what we were doing. And there was no questions, there was no issues that came up.
And to add one more thing on to Jody, this is Ben back again. At that meeting, the only question that I was asked was where the dumpster was going to go. And that's the only question I had to answer. So if there was more concern at that point in time, maybe some conditions we would have had to meet, like some snow fencing, we would have gladly done all those things. I actually took some liberties and put some snow fencing up on the left side of the house, looking from the street around the dumpster, just as a precaution to prevent any of our employees walking towards the dune. Some of that got blown over in the last storm we had, but if there was more notice to us, like, hey guys, you got to put up some snow fencing, be more cautious. There wasn't much discussion given to us, and not to blame the board or anything, but we're respectful. We understand the dune. We're not here to cause harm. We just want to build Jody and his family a house and get it back to looking like it should.
Okay, so the matter before us tonight, Sam, is your enforcement order, correct?
The enforcement order and how the applicant needs to move forward as far as any additional permitting.
So we need to ratify an enforcement order that's already been issued? Is that?
Right,
is it not been
ratify
issued yet?
and amend if needed. I can, am I
And-
still sharing my screen?
Mhm.
Yes, you
Yes.
was, Sam.
So has
Mm,
something already been issued?
The enforcement order was issued on an administrative
Okay.
basis.
Yep. thank you.
But it obviously hasn't been ratified yet. I did sign it as the deliverer. And it did serve as official for the cease and desist and to have them come back into the commission to discuss it.
Sir Chair,
Yes, Pete.
so.
What wisdom can you offer to help to give us?
I don't know if
clarity
I'm going to offer wisdom or more confusion.
here?
So
Yeah.
Sam indicated that there would be concerns from natural heritage perspective. So that's now been discussed here at a public hearing. With that discussion, we've now acknowledged that there might be an issue. So I think that needs to be taken into consideration with whatever we do going forward this evening.
Okay, thank you, Pete. You know what, team, I think a lot of good spirited discussion on all of the variations of what we're dealing with tonight. And I think we really might need some guidance from town council to share all of these ideas and homogenize this into a lucid course forward that covers all the bases. It meets the responsibilities of the commission, and it doesn't unduly penalize our resident. But what are your thoughts on that, of looping in town council on where we stand on this? With to be honest with you, I thought we were already at that point with the last email discussion, but I think a lot of good points have been raised at this meeting. So Mary, go ahead, dear.
Sam, could you go to the next page and just so we can see if there's, you were directing any activity to anything to happen? No. Or is it the next page? Restoration shall be completed in accordance. No. Okay.
So I did,
Complete the attached notice of intent by April 1st. That's what I wanted to know. Okay.
right, which
Yep.
was
Yep.
more of kind of,
Yep.
honestly, wasn't really a lot. Enforcement
Yes.
orders seem to be more focused towards if you don't have a permit at all, or if you have an
Yes.
order of conditions and you violated it. There isn't really a lot of leeway in it. I pretty much just checked that off as sort of an in case.
Yep.
And figured that once it
Understood.
gets ratified, it would be amended as needed.
Got it. So my thinking is, Bob, that we should give some guidance to these homeowners and not kick the can down the road for another meeting. That we should make the hard decision, whatever it is, either way, and take a vote on whether we think that we should ratify this enforcement order, which essentially says file a notice of intent. And I understand but I really do understand both sides of it. I understand that I'm not entirely convinced that you can do the project as currently designed without conditions, and the fact that we have to add conditions means that the project doesn't meet the requirements for a determination. Essentially, if it has a potential for impact and we have to put conditions on it to prevent impact from occurring, then it should be a notice of intent. If the project doesn't have impacts and isn't anticipated to have any impacts because it's so minor that it's going to be done inside the house and storage of a dumpster on the street or on the driveway in front, then that doesn't have impacts. I haven't been entirely convinced that this can be constructed entirely without impacts that don't have to be restored. And the only way that I would feel comfortable in putting conditions on the project is if a notice of intent was filed and we could do it through an order of conditions and not an enforcement order. I think that the natural heritage issue is probably not going to be a problem for the applicant, because as far as I could tell, the boundary was just outside of the house site and they don't technically need to file with natural heritage if that's the case. So unless Sam has new information on that, that's been the general practice, especially where it's renovation, repair of an existing structure, and you're not going any further towards the dune. I wouldn't expect that would be a huge burden, but I would like an opportunity to craft conditions that would allow for restoration of the site once it's completed, replanting of areas that need to be replanted. We can't issue an enforcement order to require something, restoration of some impact that hasn't occurred yet. It has to react to something that's already occurred. And I don't see anything that's already occurred that needs to be restored right away. It should be restored following construction, and that, I don't know, that's sort of where I'm landing on it, that the only neat way to do it is to have them file a notice of intent, but that's just my one member's opinion.
No, well, thank you, Mary, and certainly we value your opinion. Diane, I'm going to jump to you. What are your thoughts on this? My suggestion was to kick this down to town council and see whether we window door number 1, door number 2, door number 3.
I don't have a great grasp on what we can require with an enforcement order. If we can get the conditions that we want using an enforcement order into the future, I see exactly what you're saying, Mary. But if we can put conditions as far as restoration of the dunes on the sides, and that they not use scaffolding and things along those lines, if we can do those in an enforcement order based on the current violation, then I would be okay using an enforcement order. To me, it seems like it would do the same job. But I don't have a grasp on what sort of conditions we can put in an enforcement order on an RDA.
Okay, thank you, Diane. Pete, what we have the enforcement order or the NOI? Which way would you suggest we go?
I'm kind of with you. I'd like some insight from town council after all this
Yeah.
discussion.
We've covered so much ground here. I think the next meeting is April 4th. Having clarity in here, so one way we're treating everybody fairly and we're doing our job, is kind of my direction too. So TJ, what are your thoughts on this?
I agree on getting counsel because like Diane, if we can do this with an enforcement order, I think that's probably the most prudent way to do it. We probably, like you said, go back to getting a better direction or for Sam on RDAs as far as what can and can't go through there, because it seems like there's a lot of things that were already brought up that weren't a problem then that now are coming up and seeming like they're bigger than they were back then. So I need to grasp that in my own head of there, but I'd like to get some council information on the enforcement order.
Ben, you've got your hand up. Why don't you go first, and then Jody, you can follow Ben.
I know what I'm gonna say doesn't really answer your decision, but the right now the property is in a very vulnerable state. The building is half taken apart and preliminarily put back together. And the only thing I can ask for is this process to be as quick as possible. And I'm being kind of selfish when I say that. And I'm only saying that because of how it looks. We've got tarps blowing in the wind. We have a building that's half constructed. We have a steel structure that was assembled the day of the stop order, and it was left that way. So I know you guys have to do what the right thing is, but I'm asking that right thing hopefully be a quick process.
Okay, thank you, Ben. Jody, do you?
Yeah, just in closing that, Ben and I kind of always expected almost an order of conditions because I chose to live on the island. in terms of, I don't want to screw up the dune. We have dune, there's no reason for us not to put it back the way it was if anything is affected. So that was always kind of assumed to me. And if those pieces are in place, I'm sure Ben would follow it. But again, I just think that we're concerned about things that aren't happening yet. And my other question is, hasn't town council already ruled on this matter?
No, not really. Originally, they ruled on it that if there was any restoration needed, that a notice of intent would be required. But that was prior to the document coming in from DEP on Friday. So Jody, I think here's the decision you and Ben have to look at tonight. Two things can happen. You can decide to file a notice of intent and start it tomorrow, or roll the dice and come back in 2 weeks and have town council say, yeah, this could be done as an enforcement order, or no, it really does have to be a notice of intent. And so it's called wetland lottery, I guess. We don't know what town council is going to say specifically. There was, a lot of good points brought up here. But if you wanted to start a notice of intent now and prepare for it, it may be the shortest distance to your finish line, because in 2 weeks we could be telling you that's the only course you have and you've lost the 2 weeks.
Well, I've already lost multiple weeks, so
I
yeah.
think that's where I think we're going to send this off, and I think the majority of the members are going to agree to send this off to town council for clarification and determination. Can we solve this with an enforcement order, or do we need to go with a notice of intent? And again, I think the points on both sides, the ZBA and the building inspector are not requiring any additional review by them, and so hence how big is the project change. But I think there's been a lot of good discussion, and I think in fairness to all the members, getting clarity and direction from town council is the way to go. Or if you decide you want to just get a jump start in doing a notice of intent and get that started and get it in. So why don't you, I think, so let me stop there. Mary, do you think that's a fair assessment of where we're at? And
Yeah, but I don't think that town council is going to tell us what to do. I think they're still going to just require that you decide whether there's an impact or potential for impact from the proposed work.
What I expect town council to say is, yes, you can do an enforcement order and we can condition it, or no, you can't condition an enforcement order.
You can't condition an enforcement order to enforce a determination of applicability. I don't see how you can do that, but that's.
Yeah.
I have never heard of that occurring. I can't understand the mechanism for enforcing, and enforcing a determination with an enforcement order.
So I think, so let me ask the question. If there was really no structural change.
If you don't need conditions, then you don't need conditions. If you need conditions, you can't do it through an enforcement order. That's.
But I think the enforcement order we're looking at is the restoration of work that's, been damaged.
The end of construction, right?
Right.
At the end.
Yeah. Okay, Pete, so I think, TJ, are you on board with saying it's the town council for a determination and see which pathway
yes.
forward?
Yep.
Diane, what's your thoughts? Are you okay with that?
Yes.
Pete, you're still okay with that?
I think guidance it would be helpful, because we've had a lot of different discussions, and I
Yeah.
think clear guidances would help this commission.
Okay. So Tim, I don't know if this doesn't really require do we require to take any action at this point on the enforcement order, or can we still leave that in the administrative state pending town council's guidance? Do we have to take any action as a commission tonight on that risk, on the enforcement order?
The enforcement order, I read it and it said something about it needed to be ratified or not at the next meeting. So, but you could pull it up, Sam, if you want to look at it.
So if we wanted to, I would say we could ratify it now, just for the procedural, necessity of it. And then if later on it needs to be amended, we can amend it. If it turns out that we're going to pull back on it and we're not going to have it issued in the first place and we're going to take it away, we can take it away. And we could also just ratify it and wait to send it to DEP. If it does become official and there's something that's going to be, some procedure, some activity that the applicant is going to be required to do, it does need to be sent to DEP so they're aware of it. Until we get that final determination, we can wait to send it to DEP, vote to ratify it, wait to send it until we're sure of what's going to be included in it.
Well, why don't we do this? Why don't we amend the enforcement order as to no further work will take place? We haven't determined at this point whether a notice of intent has been required. I think if we amend that and ratify it, that it's basically a cease and desist at this point, and ratify that pending further review, whatever that wording should be, then we're not predetermining an outcome that we haven't decided on. So pull up your enforcement order, because you had specific.
Yeah, I'm
language.
looking at it too, and it doesn't say you need to add like the last sentence about them having to file the NOI. So maybe that can just be taken out and the cease and desist stays until.
So basically just uncheck this whole section up here and leave this for now. Have it ratified as a stop work order essentially until we
get further review from town council.
Yeah, so where the,
I'm fine with that. Okay, so let's go around the horn. Mary, are you okay if we ratify the enforcement order as a stop work order now pending final recommendations from town council?
I'm going to pass on that one.
Well, Mary, if we're scaring you, we're all scared now.
It's not scaring me. I don't understand the process. I don't agree with the direction that it's going. So, if that's what the board wants to do, that's what you should do. I also suggest maybe contacting the circuit rider at DEP on this.
I mean, I think if we take no action tonight, does this enforcement order expire by lack of action?
It does.
Okay.
Yes.
And while we're in the direction of the board seems to be to go get further counsel on this, I think keeping this in place is prudent, but as a predetermined outcome. But
we would still have to
Unfair
take action.
to issue a cease and desist and not give any direction of what happened, what the applicant should do. So other than it's been discussed at the meeting, but
yeah, it keeps an enforcement action in place, Mary, rather than letting it expire. And I think
Yep.
Mary, can I ask you a question? So if we basically uncheck this language about the notice of intent just leave it as effectively a cease and desist. And then just put, you know, similarly to if we have any very minor conditions for an RDA with a -2 determination, that, you know, I usually just put it in red next to it, or say, add it as an attachment. You know, put a note next to it, see attachment, and have a letter that goes along with it that explains what the process moving forward is going to be, that we're gonna bring it to town council, figure out how the commission should potentially move forward or get some advice on moving forward. And then returning to the meeting on the 4th to have further discussion. Is that, I know it's probably a bit
Yeah, or you can
unconventional,
vote to
but
amend the determination of applicability tonight. I mean, or I guess you can't do it tonight. You could post it and you'd have to do it at the next meeting and add conditions to an amended determination of applicability with conditions, with additional conditions.
I just think the only concern with amending the RDA is that will get no further review from DEP. It doesn't get sent back to them when it's modified. And I think this is something that DEP should probably have their eyes on at
I mean,
some
that's up
point.
to the board.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know if it keeps it active if you just vote to issue a cease and desist. I guess it probably would. So
Mary, I have a question. So then for Courtney, how is DEP saying that we should handle Courtney as an enforcement order when they haven't even, they're saying we should not be looking at that as an NOI. And if there's no NOI that it is previously being enforced, then
yeah,
how
that was a
how
case
do we
where
reconcile that guidance?
because that was a case where it had an impact. There was an impact that occurred, that was demonstrated impact, significant impact. And in order to require that impact be done, you have to do it through an enforcement order because a notice of intent is voluntary. An order of conditions is voluntary. So in this case.
So they could do the enforcement order without an RDA or an NOI?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, one's in order,
A
but
lot of projects just get enforcement order. They are directed to do work strictly through an enforcement order. It gives you a lot of ability and a lot of flexibility and managing and monitoring and adding conditions as you need to.
Then we couldn't do that here.
but that just sounds exactly what we want to do here, Mary, where that.
Right.
we
That's
could-
what
Well,
I'm
you're
kind
not,
of saying.
but the enforcement order isn't for restoration. That's the problem. You're trying to use an enforcement order to condition a project.
Well, we have two
Different.
areas where we could order restoration.
Okay,
There's no
Yeah.
altering, dredging, or filling. That's
So-
my, so,
it's altering a vegetation and altering the dune form. That would be the alteration. And so if there
by
is
putting a ladder
activity
on
that
it, or-
alters the dune, and then the enforcement order would kick in.
So couldn't we use the enforcement order for either side of that house? And say there was impact on the left, there was impact on the right.
and
Therefore,
amend it-
moving
and amend it
forward,
as
we
needed.
want to have conditions to restore that presently. And by having conditions to restore it presently, based on what's already been done, wouldn't that in effect preclude any future harm if the conditions said basically they have to replant and can't put
But
any
if the,
objects there?
yeah, but how are they gonna build their house if they have an enforcement order that requires restoration? It
Well,
has
because
to
they're
be-
saying they don't
Well,
need to be on the
they don't-
land. They're saying they can use the decks and continue building and not put anything on the sides of the property. And maybe it gets us back to having everything be in front of the property. I don't know. I'm just asking.
But you know what, we're getting
so-
into legal discussion here. And
Uh,
I
Bob-
think that,
I agree, it is legal, but can we, if we put in an order of an enforcement order now, and they did do it, is there a time frame to which it has to be maintained? So that at the end of the project, if anything if they've redisturbed it, they have to put it back in, or put another enforcement order in?
I think any violation of the Wetland Protection Act generates an enforcement order, whether there's a notice of intent or an RDA or not. And hence why when the RDA,
So we could put an enforcement order in now, and when the project is done, if there have been any more violations, we could put another enforcement order in.
well, you can always amend it if there's further damage to the resource.
Right, okay.
Pete, what,
I don't have anything to say at this moment.
okay. Jody, you've got your hand up and,
Well, I just, you guys are kind of going back and forth, and I think that an order of conditions and us keeping us per se in line and keeping my builder and doing what he's supposed to do and not touching the dune, which he's not going to do, all those things would be in place, and we could continue the job and protect the resource around us, which is what I want to do. It's my property. All those things would take place with not having to extend this out if you gave us an order of conditions, because we would follow it. I want to get this job done, and I want to make the house look better than it does today, and better than it did 3 years ago when you just looked at that Google Maps picture.
so Jody, you're saying you want to file a notice of intent? But we
No.
can't issue an order of conditions today. It doesn't, you've got to actually file a notice of intent. And then the determination of the commission is whether an order of conditions is issued.
Order of conditions only gets issued with a notice of intent. That's
Right.
what
That's
he's
the
trying to say.
process.
I think he's thinking enforcement order.
Just conditions in general, conditions in general on the project, right? That you're
So,
willing to
and,
comply with.
and conditions in general would not work in this case. Giving us conditions would not work to get this project moving forward.
I don't see how you condition an enforcement order to allow other work to occur. That there isn't a mechanism to do that. You're supposed to be enforcing a violation with an enforcement order. So there isn't a way of conditioning an enforcement order to allow work to occur. There's a way of conditioning an enforcement order to restore areas that have been damaged, and any future areas that will be damaged by future construction. Which is, I don't actually, that second part, I don't even know if you can do, because it's issuing an enforcement order that might anticipate for future projects, future damage, doesn't make sense to me.
So, but you know, the thing is, how big is the deck on the ocean side? Is that 8 feet, 10 feet wide? Ben, do you have that?
They're
answer?
about, yeah, it's
Okay.
between 8 and 10 feet. Yep.
And you would use that as a staging area. You would not even be on the resource. You'd be on the deck when you're
That
doing
is
the
correct.
framing, siding. Because most staging is 3 feet away from the house. On the right side of the house, how wide is the deck there? Is that 4 or 5
Same.
feet wide?
It's about the 8 to 10 foot line.
Okay. And the front yard is all gravel. There's no, it's a driveway. So the only remaining area is the north side of the house,
Correct.
and part of that is an existing gravel driveway. I mean,
And again,
I just don't see, I'm starting to slide back that I just don't see how you can really impact the resource beyond what we've already done. Because your platform is already man-made. No matter what you're doing with staging or siding or windows, framing is done from the interior and stood up. Jody, do you have anything else to add? You both have your hands up, you and Ben, or
no, I'm just obviously I'm a little frustrated because I feel that we're, saying this is a precedent decision for all and moving forward. I don't understand. We did what we were, again, Ben made a mistake and tore down a wall and a half, and it's opened kind of this can of worms. We haven't disrupted the dune. It's all potential. It's always, whatever you build, Bob, you're a builder. Whatever you build, there's going to be potential to mess up the area around. Okay. And you try to prevent that as much as you can. And when the work is done, what do? You clean up and you make sure you get it back the way it was, if it goes that far. That was always in play. So I feel that I'm almost getting penalized for something that may happen, for if something happens to the dune. But like you said, on 3 sides, it's protected. It's protected by a deck on 2. The third side is gravel. And to be honest with you, the other side is gravel as well. Over time, the wind has blown the sand on top of the gravel. But the reality is there is gravel on that north side of the house as well. So there is room there to work for Ben to do his job and to get this project moving.
All right, we're now at 8:45. We've been talking about this matter. Do we have a motion to amend the enforcement order to a cease and desist pending site inspection by the commission?
So moved.
Okay, do we have a second?
Second,
Okay, all those in favor, roll call vote. Mary,
Yes,
Pete,
Yes,
TJ,
aye.
Diane?
Yes.
The chair votes yes. All right, the second matter is, let's craft the questions to go to town council to add clarity to the points that have been raised tonight. And I'll work with Sam on them, and they'll be circulated, but no one can respond to them. Okay, we
Would
can't respond to all.
Would it be helpful, Bob, if I tried to set up a Zoom meeting for you and me and Lisa and Mary probably too?
Yeah, I think the big thing is just quantifying where we're at. I mean, I think the questions is, our job is to protect the resource. But we got to stay in our lane while we're protecting the resource. I think that's where we're having some where we're having a debate on, and town council can offer guidance on that. So Jody, this is going to be continued to the April 4th meeting. Sam, I'm not sure this requires any formal vote to continue this, or does it?
I don't believe it does. I think it's
The matter will be
discussion item.
continued. Okay. Well, why don't we do this? Is there a motion to continue this matter to the April 4th meeting?
so moved.
Okay, do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, all those in favor, roll call. Mary?
yes, but I thought you decided you had to ratify the enforcement order at this meeting,
No, we already
We just
did.
did.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
did. Yeah,
but not by vote. Okay.
yeah, we did by vote.
Okay.
That was the first
Okay.
vote that,
Sorry.
that was-
missed
that was
Okay,
the-
and to do a site inspection. Okay.
Right, so,
Okay,
yeah, so that's
Sorry.
that's what we ratified, so that's
Lost
in
me.
place, Mary.
yeah.
And now, just so we have a motion to continue this issue to the
Yes.
next meeting. Okay, and we have a motion, a second, and Mary, you're in
Yes.
favor? Okay, Pete? TJ, Diane,
Yes.
and the chair votes yes. Okay, we'll try to craft something and see if we can identify the competing concerns that we have and find out. Town council may not say you can do one or the other, but they may say they're both options. And if that's the result, then we can proceed, make a decision on which option is in the best interest of all the parties here, protecting the resource. All right, thank you. So next order of business is, okay, we're gonna have a fun night here tonight, guys. It's 6 Courtney Drive for work to construct an addition to an existing structure and after the fact restoration of disturbed BVW and buffer zone. Sam, if you have any breath left, can you provide an overview on this matter?
I have all the breath left. All right, so first of all, good news, we did get a file number last week. This is DEP file number 0501400. We've finally broken into the 1400s, very exciting. So this was first brought to my attention by the applicant himself and Tom Hughes, who is his representative. Initially, the violation issue is what was brought to my attention. So this was some clearing that was done in the in the buffer zone, and some disturbance within the BBW as well. That was originally intended to just clear some space in the backyard, basically just to get some sun at the pool that's back there. It was entirely unintentional. And as I've said a couple times to you guys before, it's one of those kind of weird areas where it is BBW, but if you don't know any better, if I didn't know any better, I might have done the same thing, not realizing that it's a jurisdictional area. It's very easy to miss. A lot of it is mainly based on the soils. So again, if you don't know, it would be very easy to not know. So they are now looking to get the notice of intent or the order of conditions for the work to construct the addition, which is actually up on the pool area. It's an already developed area for the most part. And the NOI is also covering the the buffer zone restoration, which is all the calculations and everything are in the plans. I'll let Tom cover that. As we've discussed a few times already, DEP did advise us and request that we cover the BVW specific disturbance under an enforcement order, because as they've stated, it mandates the restoration versus allowing it and the potential for it to go undone. So the enforcement order is just going to be basically like a friendly enforcement order that they already know is coming. I do have that drafted and I can pull that up at some point. I would recommend doing 2 separate votes for that. Maybe vote to close the hearing first if we get to that point tonight, and then issue the enforcement order, or continue and then issue the enforcement order, whichever one we get to. But they should be done separately, to ratify the enforcement order and to get the order of conditions done.
So
And we
Sam,
kind
I have a
of-
question for you. What is the status of the 2007 order of conditions 050919? No certificate of compliance has been issued on that, has it?
We don't actually, we have nothing for that at all. It very well could have been that one is another one that was a victim to our flooding issue and the file was destroyed. Unfortunately, the order of conditions was never recorded. So we have absolutely zero information on that. That being said, I did have Chrissy track down the building file. We did locate the building file, and it does have building permits, full, complete building permits, all signed off on and approved for the work to install the pool, as well as the retaining wall that is currently there. The retaining wall that's there around the pool right now is new, but it was a replacement of a previously existing one that was put up when the pool was installed. It does appear that that was all appropriately permitted and it went through all of the appropriate processes for everything. So that it does appear to be all kosher, for lack of a better term.
So what my question is, the responsibility of filing the order of conditions is the applicant, correct?
Right. It was a different applicant though. It was the previous homeowner.
No, I know, but so just follow my questions if you would. So we have an outstanding order of conditions that the applicant failed to record back in 2007, which was required. And there's been no certificate of compliance or certificate of completion issued. So how do we do anything further until we address the outstanding issue here?
Well,
It
we
could
don't
be a-
necessarily know that a COC was never issued because unfortunately we have no record of
Yeah,
anything.
you can't do anything in this case, Bob. Basically, it's unenforceable
unfortunately.
because it was never, the recording of the order was never enforced, so we don't have a way to require a certificate of compliance.
Okay. Yeah, it's just, you know what, Mary, we were talking about this on another project, having an order of conditions that hadn't got a certificate of compliance, and we wanted to close that out. Okay,
And
well,
we
that,
should be, you know, normally we would have to do that, but if there isn't a way to do it, because we can't reference a recording of a, you know, to release an order. There's nothing to
Wait.
issue the certificate, there's nothing to record the certificate against.
okay. All right, well, that, I can tell you, that was my big question. So basically, we got two issues. We get an enforcement order on the restoration, and then we have the second issue is the NOI. So how do you want to handle this first, Sam? You want to do the enforcement order first on the restoration, or you want to do you want to have Tom make a suggestion to us? Is he on the line?
I think it was, well, Tom and I discussed this a couple days ago. I think it would be best to, I guess, maybe have a concurrent discussion about both at the same time. And then, you know, similar to how we did this with Green Street a few months ago, discuss both projects at the same time, both activities, and then separate the votes. So when we get to the end of whatever we're going to discuss, you know, however we're moving forward with the notice of intent, whether it's to continue or to close and issue the order of conditions, do that first, and then open up the enforcement order, make an official motion, vote, ratify that, and get that handled. But I think we can kind of do both at the same time and then do the votes separately.
Does it require an amended NOI though, where we're actually eliminating a big chunk of it? Just to keep the paperwork clean.
I don't believe it does require an amended notice of intent. It's basically how I've drafted the order of conditions, the special
Okay, gotcha.
conditions. It's listed in the findings that the restoration of the BVW alone is covered under an enforcement order.
And I would just say that I don't think that's accurate, Sam, that's how the comment was worded, that the BVW restoration should be handled under an enforcement order, but it should be BVW and buffer zone, because it was all cutting that was not authorized. So it should be lumped together as one,
Okay,
not separate BV, and then that's easier for us too. Just all the restoration is under the enforcement order. That's
So
why,
do
okay.
you recommend, Mary, do you think an amended filing is required?
no.
Okay. All right. Is Tom here to make his
Yes.
case?
Yeah,
All right.
good evening.
Good evening, Tom.
So to clarify, one of the things DEP specifically said BVW, and I did ask a question back to them. And then they said, well, the buffer zone part's optional if the commission wants to do it. I'm in agreement with Mary that I think for the intent of what they're looking at, they want you to put in the enforcement order anything that you want to make sure gets done, even if we walk away from doing the addition. Right. And I think that's their point, right? If we walk away from doing the addition, we don't go forward with the order of conditions, they want to make sure that the things that were damaged are restored.
Right.
So doing it that way, we're fine with the enforcement order. And adding the buffer zone restoration, I think is appropriate there. And then what I think makes sense is it's still referenced in the order of conditions, because if you have the monitoring required in the enforcement order and the monitoring required in the order of conditions, once we've done the work to restore that and it's in the monitoring phase, that allows the commission to consider lifting the enforcement order. And at that point, the order of conditions can take over on the monitoring, because once you've done the work, then it's mandatory that you comply with the order, if that makes any sense. So the two kind of do go hand in hand a bit.
Yep.
And that's not uncommon to do it that way. It's also not uncommon that people, you know, voluntarily agree to do it after the fact NOI, but every once in a while, a commission does get burned, and DEP does get burned on it on an after the fact. It's all voluntary with no backup enforcement order requiring the work get done. So it makes total sense to me. So I guess what I think we should do is I can, you know, pull the project plans up on the screen if you'd like, take a quick look at them, answer any questions, and then just sort out I would assume you guys want the buffer zone work in the enforcement. So just have that added into the enforcement thing and have you then vote on the order, have you vote on the enforcement order. And I think it's a lot simpler than what you just spent an hour and a half on the
Yeah, yeah.
other project.
So how would you bifurcate that, Tom, in your filing now? What? why don't
So,
you pull up the, have to pull up your project.
yeah, hold on a second. Why is my PDF viewer not showing up? Hold on a second. I have too many windows open. All right. This is not your project. Give me a second. Here we go. All right. So here's the project site. We did the walk. Just want to show you, this is the disturbance area. You can see in orange here. And then this is the wetland line as flagged and as you guys looked at when we were out there on site in the rain. It's not in the floodplain. There's an aerial photograph from, I think that's 2017. Here's some photos. This is, you know, when you guys were out, it was raining and it was puddly and stuff. But if you look at what it looked like, you know, without the puddles, I think you can see that to the layperson, this may not have appeared to be wetland. There's a picture from the listing when it was up for sale. This actually looks like it was taken while the clearing had just been done, that area, which is why I included that. Is a picture just of the bright soils in the upland area. And I thought I had a picture of the hydric soils, but anyway, so we looked at that whole area. And now to the project plans. Okay, so this dotted area here is the area that was disturbed in wetlands. It wasn't all cleared, but it was definitely disturbed by the equipment operating. There were some trees removed, but there are trees still remaining. There's regrowth occurring, but it's fairly limited. And then this is the buffer zone area. You can see the wall, and the wall was one of those Versalock walls that apparently was sort of failing. So that's why it was replaced. And then you can see we've got the 25 and the 50, and the area that I've given you for buffer restoration is actually just up to this 50 line. That was a question that was asked when we were in the field. There's an additional 700 or so square feet that was disturbed in the buffer zone, but that was outside of what I counted for restoration, because typically you guys would allow an alteration in the outer 50. We're not really going to be proposing to do much there other than just vegetate it and stabilize it, but we're okay if you want to include that in the requirement that we also do this area. So the proposed addition is right over here. We have proposed erosion control here. So the order of conditions would be allowing this and then requiring, I believe Sam has some conditions just requiring monitoring and keeping this area invasive free. And then I think your enforcement order as written requires the submission of a restoration plan, which you essentially already have, but by a certain date, and then the work be done by a certain date. And I'm not sure what Sam's got in there for the work being done by, but I think, you know, having a fall date for that planting all to be done by, although we intend to do it in the spring, I think would be fair enough, and have a submission into you for the spring. And I know when we were on site, Mary, you had asked about, you know, picking up some of the resprouting stumps and possibly adjusting the planting scheme accordingly. Doing it under the enforcement order does allow us to kind of go back and forth as it's being implemented to make adjustments to make it make sense. So it actually gives us a little bit more flexibility to have a better restoration plan. Separating them out. So I'm fine with it. I think, you know, this addition is almost an RDA. You know, and you guys have talked a lot about what's an RDA for, what's it not for. So an RDA, the way I try to think of it, and this might help some of you guys, is essentially a fancy way of saying, do I need a permit? And then you guys are saying, no, you don't need a permit when you issue a negative, right? So only the state could come up with something where you ask if you need a permit, and then you get a permit that says you don't need a permit, but that's what it is. A notice of intent is something when there is a risk of that alteration occurring. So you do need a permit and you need conditions to protect it. In this case, the work is all on the uphill side of that retaining wall. Very minimal risk, but is there some risk? Sure. You know, equipment operating. Could it cause some, you know, erosion to wrap around that wall and get down there? Maybe, but it's doubtful. I think it's a very simple addition project. What made this more complex was the after the fact nature and the damage in the buffer zone and in the wetland. That's what made it a clear, you know, after the fact NOI. So with that, I guess what I would ask is that the commission enters into some discussions. I'm here to kind of discuss anything with you as we do this, to refine the enforcement order, to have it cover what you think it should cover, and go through Sam's draft order and any conditions that are in there, kind of have that discussion all together, then have you ratify the enforcement order and issue an order of conditions after all that discussion, with the goal of the sum of the two parts needs to cover everything. Right? So if it's not in the enforcement order, it better be in the order of conditions. And if it's not in the order of conditions, it better be in the enforcement order, kind of thing. You don't want to leave anything out.
So it would seem the easiest course of action would be to address the notice of intent because it's just the structure. And in the order, we would eliminate anything that was to the restoration. Then have a draft of the enforcement order and handle this separately. We could probably do the notice of intent tonight. We don't, and close out the hearing if we don't have any questions on that. The enforcement order is not a public hearing anyway. So we could address that, and that could be followed up at our next meeting to ratify it.
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah, I'm just throwing that out there, Tom, for your.
Right.
for your discussion.
So I think there's value in still in having it not be totally clean on the addition only, and including requirements related to monitoring, because the one thing the order does is the order gets filed at the Registry of Deeds, and an enforcement order goes in a file cabinet, and somebody has to remember it exists. It's in your minutes, whatever, but say this board changed over and say Sam left, and a year and a half from now, somebody may totally drop the ball on the enforcement order. So there's still value in incorporating conditions that may be duplicative in the order, but you need anything that you absolutely have to have done. It needs to be in the enforcement order. If that makes any sense. So
Yeah, it's trying to figure a way how to bifurcate this to get it done.
right, and I
Well,
think Sam has drafted both documents, so I think it's a matter of just pulling those up and going
Mary-
through them.
Yeah, no,
Mary, what's your comments, Mary?
yeah, just, I mean, the addition is pretty straightforward project. It's a standard order of conditions. I would just say that in the findings section that that it specifically states that the wetland and buffer zone restoration that are shown on the plan entitled such and such that is approved as part of this project is authorized, it will be conducted under an enforcement order, and giving the specifics about the enforcement order issued, state and whatnot that goes with it. And that it will be implemented according to the restoration plan that is approved under the enforcement order. And then also that any additional monitoring that is required upon lifting of the enforcement order will be done under the order of conditions if there has already been less than 2 years of monitoring of the site to meet the BVW restoration requirements of 75% vegetative cover. So that's a lot, but it just.
So I do have that drafted already. I would, before we close anything out, I would really like to throw that up on the screen so that everybody can take a look at it and
Please
make
do
sure
so.
that the verbiage that I have in there is all set.
Good.
Oh, you didn't have to.
Yeah.
I meant to wait until we were ready, but
Unless
if
you
you
guys
want me
want
to
to
throw
see
it
the
up now,
plan
I can
again.
certainly do
Yeah.
that. All right, so this is what I have so far. And I realize it's probably gonna need some changing.
Notice of intent finally included after the fact restoration, okay. So. Yeah, I would just reference the plan that that's shown on.
So like in this part. Because the plans
The
are
re-
referenced
Just say the
down.
restoration will be conducted in accordance with the enforcement order and the approved restoration plan. That covers it. I would just say the approved restoration plan because we might modify it, so.
So I was gonna say, so we're not requiring that they submit a different plan
Yeah,
at this point. Okay.
And then you had a special condition too, Sam,
Yes.
about monitoring?
So that one's standard that stays in there. Oops, that's not what I wanted to do. Sorry about that. These two are the ones that I added. And again, please feel free to change my language.
So 60 should maybe just say the applicant is, is responsible for monitoring according to the enforcement order. And any additional monitoring up to the 2-year period. I can't formulate a sentence right now, but you know what I'm saying? You can work with that one.
Yeah.
To ensure that if the enforcement order happens to be lifted before 2 years of monitoring is completed and the 75% vegetative cover is not yet established, that the order of conditions would kick in.
So basically the applicant shall monitor the restoration order as mandated under the enforcement order.
I think you just say for a minimum of 2 growing seasons. Because if we do it to comply with the enforcement order, then we're complying with that. And if we close out the enforcement order, we still have to do it.
That's already in 61. Well,
Yeah.
the 2 growing seasons is below Sam in 61.
Yes, it is. So do we need 60 then?
I think that becomes 60.
Just it's monitored according to the enforcement, the conditions of the enforcement order.
Because then they don't get the certificate of compliance until it's monitored for a couple of years.
Right.
Right.
And so even if the enforcement order is ignored or if someone forgets
And,
it's there, then.
Right, but and then I just would add something about, well, like we could do it in the enforcement order or here that there's reporting required. Monitoring reports required to be submitted by December 31st of each year following completion or something. You can do that in the enforcement order, I suppose.
Okay. So the enforcement order, so that's the extent and type of activity. Activity has been conducted in an area subject to protection. And then checked off resource area alterations shall be corrected, resource areas returned to their original condition. Restoration plan shall be filed with the issuing authority on or before March 31st. I just threw that random date in there. For the following: restoration of BBW and buffer zone, as well as monitoring plan and invasive species management plan. So where would we want to add?
Well, the
monitoring
arrest,
requirement?
where you've got
Have the-
restoration of BVW and buffer zone as well as monitoring plan to be an invasive species plan to be provided to the commission for review and approval or something.
And Mr. Chair, can I ask for a couple more weeks for submission of that? That's actually only 10 days out to put together that invasive plan.
We want to say April 30th.
That would be great.
Okay. All right, does this look like it's all set?
I actually, my hand's out. I'm waiting.
Diane, what comments do you have, my friend?
Oh, Bob, thank you.
Anyway,
I actually.
I'm looking at
Is-
the document being typed. Sorry about that.
No, me too. And that's why I had a question about the enforcement order and whether or not this is the time to be asking questions about the enforcement order. Because when I had looked at the enforcement order saying we're talking about the removal of the vegetation and all that, and I did have a question about the retaining wall. And whether or not that should be included as part of the enforcement order. Tom, when you look at the plan that was submitted, the retaining wall, I know they're saying that it was all permitted and everything in the past. There's the part that says retaining wall added, which is a different section of that wall, right? And when you look at it, it all goes together. It's obvious it was all done at the same time. So that part that they added wasn't just replacing what was already there, right?
No, it was, so apparently what happened is the surveyors went out to survey the property for the addition application. The surveyor who went out while they were working on the wall. And they kind of stopped when they realized that this site had previously gotten, had wetlands delineated there. They had access to the old plan apparently. And so then I did the wetland work and they went back there to finish up the survey. So the wall was added between the bouts of survey, but it was still replacing a wall that was there before. It was just they had replaced the wall up to that point. So the plan is kind of weird that way, that it represents what was added between two survey steps, not added you know, from 0 to 60, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, because we've never seen the prior plan, right? That's right, Sam?
Right, yeah, and unfortunately, we don't have any of the prior plans. The only plans, the closest I got to any plans for that was basically just like a very limited sketch on the building permit of basically the dimensions of the pool that was being constructed.
So,
So
okay, so then the
no-
person, so when Hancock did this plan that we have, they had halfway replaced the retaining wall and then
when they-
added more retaining wall afterwards. Because it just looks like when they say retaining wall added, it looks like it's been an additional retaining wall.
Right, my understanding is so because when folks like me go out and we hang flags, the surveyors often have to go back to pick up the flags.
Yeah,
I'm a little different that I have a GPS, so they don't always have to go back. But in this case, they had not finished the survey. I did the wetland flagging, but they hadn't finished it because they didn't want to waste field time by going back to finish up if they were going to have to go back again to pick up my wetland flags. So when they went back, that new wall was added in addition to the prior, do you know what I mean? Into beyond what they had originally surveyed when they did the first part of it. When they were
but
out.
wouldn't it, there would have been a wall already there, right?
I guess it had been demoed. They basically had demoed it and the guys were building the wall in that direction, is my understanding.
Yeah, because I mean, what I'm getting at is if they built more of a retaining wall there and there would have had to been some sort of fill behind it, or at least something would have had to been done. And my question was whether that should be part of the enforcement order. But if it was already there, I guess
So,
it wouldn't be, but it
Yeah,
doesn't
so the-
seem, it looks like from the plan it wasn't.
right, the dividing line between the two, between what's in the enforcement order and what's in the permit is if you're okay with the wall the way it is now, whether or not it changed from prior iterations, I mean, I think then it doesn't necessarily have to go in the enforcement order unless you want something changed on it. Right? If
And now I was just a matter of if they added to the wall as opposed to just keeping the wall that was there and repairing it, would that be more of an intrusion on the area?
So
Is my question.
the area, if I pulled up the plan, I think you'll see that area even that's labeled as that is in the
Yeah,
further part of the buffer zone, I'm pretty sure, like, or yeah, Sam, if you can just pull it up.
yeah, it's pretty close. It's close to the 25.
Yeah, let's take a look. So and that's right near where the pool is, and I'm
Yeah.
certain there would have been a wall there for the pool. I mean, I think that was probably the original reason they put in the wall.
Well, yeah. That's-
So if you see where that section is, it is in the kind of, it's in the outer part of that it's right mid between 25 and 50 and then extends out and away. And I tend to think if I had even come in, say the wall did end where that part shows, if I ever came into you guys and said, hey, we want to wrap the wall up around the pool like that, I don't think we would have had a problem getting it permitted.
Yeah, I'm just trying to say if it wasn't part of the old wall, then the enforcement order only mentions the removal of the vegetation. It doesn't
Right.
mention anything about building or adding to the existing wall that was there. And then whether or not that would be something that would have required a visit to Peter.
Right. So I know the addition will get the attention of Peter. We could certainly make
I
sure
would just-
Peter looks at the wall as part of that to see if there was any issue with him. Sounds like he has a file where a wall was permitted previously, so we could look at that. And then if the commission feels like just for record keeping, you could put in the after the fact, in the order of conditions, the after the fact approval of the replacement retaining wall. And that
That's already included in
right.
there.
So that just makes it, that basically sets in stone what's on the plan now as the approved wall. And if it ever changed in the future, now you have something on file, and hopefully the town doesn't store them in a wet trailer. um, and lose those, but but I don't think that needs to be in the enforcement order, because the difference of the restoration in the wetland and the restoration in the buffer that's shown is those areas were damaged by the work that's been done. And the enforcement order's purpose is to fix damage.
Mhm.
So in this case, the enforcement order is saying you have to fix the damage in the BVW and you have to fix the damage in the buffer. And that's what DEP was kind of saying, that in the order, it just approves things. And there's nothing, it's very difficult to write an order of conditions that would hold up legally that says you just got a permit for this project and you have to do it.
No, I get what you're saying there. I'm
Yeah.
just saying, I don't know if that was more damage that was done. is
Yeah,
what
I
I'm
mean,
saying.
there would
By
have been.
adding like
So,
about a quarter
Guys,
of
let
the
me
wall.
interject here for 1 second, please. Go through the
Yeah.
chair when we're talking, please.
Sorry.
So Diane, are you thinking that the wall needs to be removed because it wasn't permitted?
No, I'm not saying it needs to be removed. I'm just wondering if it was more damage that was done to the area within the buffer zone.
Okay. At a minimum, it should be picked up and covered either in the NOI or in the restoration, so that it's memorialized and it's not a question anymore, I would think, but. All right, well, you know what, guys, it's getting late here, and, part of me says this should have come back again bifurcated, and we shouldn't be hashing this out on the commission's time, but let's try to get through this. Do we have any other questions, Sam, on that document you had put up? Is that a finalized document? Do we have any more comments on that?
Which document?
The one you just finished editing?
The enforcement order?
Yeah.
So it sounds like everything up to this point, restoration plan for the following is all set. The only additional thing, and I'm not really sure if this is where this would be added or not. Doesn't really seem like it. But this section, just to note that the restoration work should be completed no later than put November 15th in. I know you can plant reasonably up to that date. It's not really super great to get into that late in the season, but I know you can. So if we'd like to bump that up a little bit into maybe October.
But we have monitoring anyway, right?
Right.
So they should optimize the planting season because they want the highest growth rate, so. I'd leave it up to them, and that if they guessed wrong, then it's gonna get picked up on the monitoring and it'll be redone.
Fair enough.
Okay,
Give them as long as possible to actually get it done. And
yeah, and you know how the weather goes, so. Mary, do you have any other questions on the enforcement order, any other suggestions?
No, I mean, if you wanted to Diane's point, if you wanted to just say the commission recognizes that portions of a retaining wall were constructed without authorization, those are being authorized under an order of conditions, and after the fact order of conditions or something. But other than that, I think this is directing them to provide us with more information, so it's not our last crack at it. So I
Right.
think this is fine, and I'd be in favor of making a motion to approve it.
And I think to that point, now that I've started writing it, I think it might actually be better, because if the retaining wall in whatever form, whether it's after the fact addition or just replacement, that's all been covered under the notice of intent and will be covered under the order of conditions. I think it may confuse things a little bit if
With
we
DEP,
know,
yeah, okay, so
yeah,
that's
if we
fine,
know
take
the
it out.
enforcement order.
Yeah, that's a good point, yep.
Well,
So-
we clean it up, that's the big thing
Yeah.
on the NOI, okay,
Simplify things a little bit.
okay.
So are we all set with the enforcement order?
Yeah, do we have is there a motion to approve the enforcement order for 6 Courtney Drive?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second,
Okay, any further discussion before we do a roll call vote? Okay, hearing none, roll call vote, all in favor, say aye. Mary,
I,
TJ,
Aye.
Pete,
yes,
Diane,
Yes,
and Bob Connors votes aye.
Thank you.
All right, now the notice of intent. And Sam, we're gonna pick up the retaining wall in the notice of intent.
Yep, and that is in here already. So would,
there it is. Okay.
and I guess it ultimately depends on how we view it. My understanding was that at least from looking at like the pool schematics and everything, it appeared that the retaining wall did go all the way around.
yeah, was that there?
And it I mean, it almost, even from looking at it on the ground, it looks like it would almost be impossible not to have had it there the whole time. I mean, that would be a very steep slope had it not been there beforehand. So I can't imagine that it wasn't there on that side.
Well, I think the issue now is where do we plug it in so it's covered?
So that having it under this order of conditions addresses proposed work for the construction of the addition and after the fact approval for the replacement of the existing retaining wall. So I guess the only question is whether that verbiage is going to say replacement of existing or replacement and expansion of existing. Diane?
Well,
Can we just look at the prior plan?
I
what
don't
was
have a
approved
copy
previous-
of that.
Didn't Peter have it?
It did like a site plan.
Yeah.
The site plan wasn't in the building file. The only plan that I had in the building file was, like I said, it was basically like a pool dimensions, like a 2D schematic of the dimensions of the pool that was being installed.
So something that came from the pool contractor.
Pretty much, yeah. It was like the sketch that was added into the hard copy of the building permit application. Because unfortunately, back in the day, they didn't really require quite as much detailed information for things like that. Which is no
Daniel,
fault of
what's your pleasure on the? What's your pleasure on the retaining wall? Walk me through what you want to do. with
Yeah,
it.
my point is only that if it was added after the
Right.
fact, if it wasn't part of the original one, maybe it had been demolished and it wasn't there and then they rebuilt it, but on this plan in front of us, it says specific, that it's a highlighted area that says retaining wall added. So my concern was if we just ignore that, it was within the buffer zone. It could very well have been a disturbance to the area. And should we not at least acknowledge it or make them, have some, include their current restoration as making up for that retaining wall area as well? I mean, it's about a quarter of the wall. So it was just the fact that if it says retaining wall added on the plan, I took that to be additional retaining wall that was added.
And it's
and-
by Hancock, the plan.
Yes.
Yeah, I think what Tom, can I interject here, Bob?
Yeah, sure, certainly.
What Tom was trying to say is that's just a surveyor's note. The surveyor went back and added the rest of the wall. They went back a second time and added the wall that they missed the first time they were there. Is that correct, Tom?
Yeah, well, they weren't done, I guess they were actively working on the wall when they did the first field day out there, and
Right.
then it was months
So
later.
since when their first visit, they surveyed some of it, and they went back and surveyed the rest of it.
But why would they have highlighted it and put it in this plan as added retaining wall? Why wouldn't they just have completed the plan?
Sounds like
With
it's
the
just a
retaining wall.
surveyor's note. Yeah.
Yeah.
And Mr. Chairman, through you, I did send an email after the site visit, so it is in the record that I did note that this was a replacement retaining wall. So
Mhm.
it is in the record of the NOI that the entire thing is a replacement retaining wall through that email. So I think the fact that it's addressed with a sentence in this and that we refer to the NOI plan that shows the extent of a retaining wall and the email is in the file. I think it basically means that anybody who looks at this file in the future will know that the wall as shown on that plan from beginning to end is at least a legit legal wall at this point. And I think that's the most important thing. And any, if somebody were to come in 10 years from now and the wall looks different with a different layout, then something changed. You now have a baseline, I guess.
And
Okay.
I think
Go
it's
ahead, yeah,
important.
go ahead, Mary. I mean, excuse me, go ahead.
I think it's important too to note that. So you would use an enforcement order to mandate a change, a restoration of something that wouldn't have been approved originally. So in this case, the commission likely would not have approved of the homeowner going in and disturbing BBW just for the sake of opening up his backyard, which is why the enforcement order would be in place to make that restoration. Whereas with the retaining wall, even if that was a new section of it, if it's something that would be approved, we can cover it under the after the fact approval. Whereas if we looked at it and said, hey, we absolutely would not have permitted that under any circumstances, we're going to add that into the enforcement order and make them take it down. So because unless any of you have any reason to think that we absolutely would not have permitted that extension of the retaining wall, I think it's, more than acceptable to include the replacement under the after the fact approval.
I think
Versus
we would have
the-
approved it. We just might have required some restoration in exchange.
Right.
So-
And the restorations being done anyways under the enforcement order.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I think one thing to note is the restoration plan as it currently exists restores the buffer zone and the wetland to a higher density of vegetation than the surrounding woods. So we are doing a more aggressive restoration of that area, which would be how I would have proposed to mitigate for any potential wall impact if I'd been in front of you before it was done. So I do think that as we're proposing the mitigation, we are addressing that.
Okay, well, will someone come up with some verbiage to include within this order of conditions that memorializes the matter and lets us move on? What do we want to see?
I think the
Where do-
language as it exists already.
As an existing retaining wall. No, it is, Sam, blow that up a little. You know what it is? It's,
What if you just said the replacement?
of an existing retaining wall. So let's see, up to limit from 2020. I mean, Diane, that actually seems.
That's fine. Yeah,
It
it's
seems
fine.
okay, okay. All right, team, moving on as the clock ticks to 9:34. Mary set the record at 8 minutes. I'm probably gonna set the longest meeting of 2023.
Oh, of this year, maybe. I was gonna say, not ever, trust me. I've been in that.
Well,
What's
So do
up?
we need to accept public comment on this, or notice of intent at this point?
yeah,
We do
well,
need to
you know what,
open it.
let me go around and
We
just
haven't
see if
opened
there's
it
any more
yet.
questions from the members. Mary, do you have any other comments on this?
No,
Okay, Pete.
No
Pete, you've been
comment.
very quiet. You
I have
helped
just
run.
been observing quietly, yes.
Thank you. TJ, any comments on this one?
No, I think we've covered it fully.
Yes, I think we've done a great job reviewing it. Diane,
No,
okay, thank you. I have no further questions. Sam, do you have any recap?
I don't.
Okay. Are there any raised hands from the public at this time?
We do not.
Okay. All right, do we have any further questions or requests for information or plans amendment at this time that we have not covered? Okay, hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to close the public hearing unless there's an
So-
objection.
So moved.
Do we have a second? Okay. All those in favor, say aye. Roll call vote. Mary,
Aye.
Pete,
Yes.
TJ,
Aye.
Diane,
Yes,
and Bob Connors votes yes. All right, now we have the,
Need to take a motion to.
for the
issue an
motion,
order of
for the order of
conditions.
conditions, yep. Okay,
Make a motion to issue an order of conditions with the special conditions as drafted by the agent.
okay. Do we have a second?
second,
Okay, roll call vote. All in favor, say aye. Mary,
Yes.
TJ,
Aye.
Pete,
Yes.
Diane,
yes.
Bob Connors votes yes. All right, thank you.
Yeah,
Next matter.
Thank you very much.
Did we vote to do the enforcement order already? Ratify that?
Yeah, we did that
Thank you,
first.
'cause
yeah,
I'm,
yeah,
it's all a blur. Okay, thank
yeah.
you.
This has been one of these tough ones, Mary, you know, it's a lot of intellectual horsepower being expended here tonight. Okay, next order of business is a public hearing for DEP file 0501410 Middle Road.
01. Sorry.
Oh, 1401, excuse me. Middle Road, you know, I never read the number. I don't know. I must be tired. It's written down here. I read the silly thing. Governor's Academy for work to construct a walking path to provide access to the new Alphonse Science Building. Sam, can you provide a project overview and a recommendation on this matter?
All right, so as some of you may recall, a few weeks ago, we had some representatives from governors come in and do an administrative discussion about the walking path. This is to provide access to the new science building off of Middle Road out behind the facilities buildings. The walking path is going to include a additional section of concrete sidewalk on the opposite side of Middle Road. I think that's the east side, west side, I don't know.
West side.
West side. And then on the east side, going through the woods is going to be a crushed stone path, as well as a section or a couple sections that are going to be constructed out of a sort of boardwalk material. And that detail is in the plan. This is going in front of the planning board for a site plan review. The first hearing is scheduled to be on April 19th. As of right now, we have not received any additional comments from, really the main one that would create any potential changes would be comments from Joe Swarka, who's the engineer, and he does the stormwater review. There is a section of boardwalk that's going to go over a previously established stormwater basin. Some discussion on that is covered in the narrative, and the impacts that it has on that area. So we could certainly wait for those comments, or if everyone's comfortable with moving on without them, we don't necessarily have to, but it is going in front of planning in a few weeks for its first discussion.
Okay, thank you, Sam. I remember the presentation. Mary, any questions on this project?
To be honest, haven't had a chance to review the plans in great detail. I understand we don't have a file number, right, from DEP?
We do have a file number.
Okay, and did they have any comments?
There were no comments from DEP. Nope.
Okay, great. Can you circle back to me?
Okay, yeah, I will, Mary. Thank you. Pete, any comments?
Mark, do you want to pull up the plans, or do you want me to?
Why don't you
Yeah,
go
actually,
ahead,
why don't
Sam?
I do that? You know what, Mark, why don't you give your presentation?
Okay,
Make it short and sweet due to the hour of the night and.
absolutely. Yeah, Sam, if you want to share screens, I'll try to pull them up and hopefully I have better success at that than I did it with the planning board the other night, but.
I think
just
you have the
remembered my
smallest,
question.
as I recall, this had the smallest wetland replication was what, 14 square feet or something that we were
It was
replicating?
tiny.
Yes.
14
They've
required.
got 50 that they're proposing, but it's on an island.
14 displaced.
Oop.
Sorry, Mark, did you say you were gonna share the?
If you have it up, that's fine.
All right, let's blow this up a little bit.
The
Tough
The only
target.
thing, Sam, is that you have the plan set from, that we submitted, in fairness, from March 7th. And we have a somewhat updated plan set from the 15th.
All right, if you have that up already, if you want to share it, because I think that's still in my email. Okay,
Okay, I will,
sorry.
I don't know if you shared with me yet. Can you see that? Oh, no,
No,
that's yours still.
I stopped sharing.
Okay, let me try this again.
Technical difficulties.
That is still like the older set. Hold on. Let me click on this.
Let me see, I'm trying to pull up my email too. Let's see who does it faster. Oh, we have your computer screen. There
That's
we go.
still, darn, that's still the old plan. Wait a minute. Oh, gosh. My bad. Here we go. Can you see that now?
Yes.
Great.
Hey.
Okay. So this gives the commission, hello, Mark Beaudry from Civil Works New England. And with me this evening is Tom Woodruff, Director of Facilities from Governor's Academy, as well as Wendy Reed, who's the Environmental Health and Safety Manager for Governors. So looking at this plan here, you can see where the walkway is going to go relative to Middle Road in the facilities buildings. This aerial does not show the science building that's under construction up in the hill right up here. So, but the intent, as Sam mentioned, is to, I think, have a connection of a walkway from the end of the walkway that's at along Middle Road, like roughly right there, that will go along about 115 feet along Middle Road with a paved sidewalk. I think, Sam, you mentioned concrete. It's actually bituminous concrete, so, you know, asphalt paving, which is consistent with the other walks. We'll then go across the street with a crosswalk and then start going cross country and eventually pop out over. We will be going across the berm of the stormwater basin for the facilities buildings, and then we'll pop out onto the facility building driveway and go up along the driveway to cross over and then you know, find its way up to the new science building. And this will give students, faculty, staff, et cetera, an off-road pathway to get safely from across, you know, across the campus to the science building without having people have to walk down Middle Road and then up the driveway, et cetera. So we did explore a couple alternatives that I think we talked about last time, but I'm happy to share with those again. But both of those included pathways along Middle Road that would have required more wetland filling, more floodplain filling, et cetera. So, and also the electric company installed a whole bunch of poles on the east side, which is planned up of Middle Road, which obstructed the pathway along the east side. So now going to our plan set. Okay. You can see this plan now in more detail. I want to zoom in and kind of walk you through it quickly. So I mentioned about 115 feet of walkway along Middle Road, which is right there. We've got a total of 432 feet of crushed rock pathway, which is some right there. And then it meanders through the woods right here. And then where it crosses the spillway of the stormwater basin, it will switch to boardwalk, and then it switches back to crushed stone pathway to go along the side of the driveway to another crosswalk. In addition to that 24 feet of boardwalk, we also have 108 feet of boardwalk from roughly there to roughly there. And you'll notice when I zoom in a little bit more here. Okay, so again, there's the edge of Middle Road. You cross the, you're in an upland area, you cross the stone wall. And then you get into the wetland area, which is the double dot dash line in bold. So there's this line on the west side, there's this line on the east side, both of which were delineated by DeRosa Environmental. And there's also an upland island right in here, which DeRosa flagged and identified as historic wetland fill. They must have found some hydric soils or something underneath. I'm not really sure how they determined that, but they called it a historic fill area. And so what we wanted to do is cross an area that would, span over the wetland, a narrow little stretch of wetland, get onto the upland island, go between a couple large, glacial erratic rocks, go between those, and then continue on the boardwalk until we get to the other side, into an upland area on the east side, and then we transition into the stone pathway right there. So before I forget, these black dots are light bollards, dark sky compliant LED light bollards that are about 50 feet on center. And in addition to the boardwalk and the stone path are 5 feet wide. We'll also have 18-inch wide vegetated shoulders on the sides of the pathway for a minimum cleared area of 8 feet wide. The boardwalk itself will stay 5 feet wide. And as you can see here, there are some areas of cut and fill that are proposed. And the reason for that is that we needed to, have the pathway be ADA compliant, which has a maximum longitudinal slope of 5%. We'd like to go 4.5%. So that, we are dealing with some slopes here. And that way we can maintain ADA compliance. Where we are getting across the berm of the stormwater basin, we're holding the slope, as you can see here, and continuing that existing slope up to the pathway, and then going down at a 2-to-1 slope on the other side. So we are not filling in the stormwater basin that exists for the facilities, building area. But because that's a pretty steep slope right there, as you can see with the close contours, we are required to do some filling in that area. So in addition to the BVW and buffer zone, we also have floodplain here, which is at elevation 10. And what we did on this plan, that was the changes that were made between the plan that was submitted on the 7th to the 15th submitted to planning, was that planning came back with some comments that they just basically wanted some additional information added to the plan. The design did not change whatsoever. One of the things they wanted to see was the floodplain area highlighted on the plan. So what we did is shaded the elevation 10 and below area in this gray hatch pattern that we didn't carry it all the way to the north and the south. We just hatched it in the vicinity of the work. But So I think as we talked about at the informational meeting back on February 7th, we have bordering land subject to flooding in addition to the BLSF, but the bordering land subject to flooding where it overlapped the BVW was, anything within that area for filling does not have to be compensated for, which was news to me. So we've adjusted the documentation or whatnot that was submitted to the commission on the 7th to address that. So, Mr. Chairman, you mentioned the smallest replication area ever and or darn close to it. Let me go to another one of our plans here where we show that in a little bit more detail. And that's it right there. And basically, we've got filling for posts and in the piers that they'll be sitting on of about 14 square feet in the BVW area. So what we came up with was a wetland replication area that seemed to make some sense, that was larger, of course, than 14 square feet. It actually is about 50 square feet. So we're replicating roughly at a ratio of 4:1. And I know there was some discussion about the suitability of this area for replication last time, but at the informational meeting. But thinking on this, what we feel is that this is an opportunity not only to replicate, but to restore. So that's why we were interested in this area. And we will be able to get, small excavators or whatever into the working from the upland area right in here that will be able to reach in and do that work without actually having to get into the wetland area. And we can stabilize those areas with vegetated mats, et cetera. So, we still submitted with this as being the replication area. We are not calling this anymore a compensatory flood storage area formally, because my understanding was a compensatory flood storage couldn't go into a wetland area. But what we're doing just by creating that wetland replication area, and elevation will be lowered to below 10 feet in elevation. We have a 10 contour right there. So we are in effect getting compensatory flood storage there without actually calling it that. And I think we're looking at the couple posts that are below elevation 10, I think result in about 10 cubic feet. 2 cubic feet of floodplain filling. And we estimate this area to be about 13 cubic feet in volume below elevation 10. So we're more than making up for in compensating for that. We're just not formally calling it compensatory flood storage.
Okay. Hey, Mark, let me stop you there and see if we have any questions
Sure.
from the members at this point. Mary, any questions from Mark up to this point?
Yes, how are you stabilizing your 2-to-1 slopes?
Yep, we do. Good question, Mary. We'll be going with definitely loam and seed, but we'll be going with a most likely a vegetated mat, like a stabilization mat. So which is appropriate for slopes steeper than 3-to-1.
Okay, is that specified somewhere on the plan that you're going to use?
That's a really good question. We might not have, because we originally had it as a 3-to-1 and I tightened it up. So that is something that we will definitely be appropriate as a condition of approval for sure.
Okay.
One thing that was mentioned at the informational meeting, we had a discussion about there's another view of the replication area where we are looking at adding, preserving an existing tree that's in the middle of it.
Yep.
And then working around that and putting in 4 new native shrub material, which I'm happy to consider any recommendations that the commission might have. I know the planning board is interested in what those plant materials might be. So A couple, this shows some details that we have, the pathway cross-section, sidewalk cross-section. Here's the, here's the boardwalk cross-section that I think we talked about last time that hasn't changed from the informational. It's a maximum of 30 inches high so that we don't need railings. It's a minimum of 15 inches off the wetland area. But importantly, you can see the detail of the grading, which is fiberglass material with a slip resistant surface on it. But it's ADA compliant, which is really important, but at the same time has 62% open area, which you can see right there. So it's going to allow a lot of light down through, rain to pass down through. It's raised up, the little posts are 12 feet on center, running along it. So it will allow water to pass through, very limited, floodplain interruption, etc. And we are calling for diamond piers to be used, which are the same footing component that's being used on the science building walkway, elevated walkway. And I know at the informational meeting, we talked about the possibility of using helical piles that technically would not need to be replicated for, but one concern we have about, and this was addressed in our narrative, but one thing we're concerned about with using helical piles is that would require a piece of equipment to get into the wetland area, where these diamond pier installations do not. They can be installed with basically hand tools and whatnot. So we think while this technically requires some replication, we think this might be less disruptive on the wetland. And at the same time, we get to do some, like I said, some replication that I think would be a good restoration opportunity as well. So about 81 feet of the boardwalk, by the way, is over the BVW, and that's how we came up with our filing fee and whatnot. So one thing that I'd like to talk about quickly, unless you have any other questions for me to this point?
Yeah, Mary, any follow-up questions for Mark at this point?
The filing is really complete, and there's a lot of information, and as you're going along, a lot of my questions have been answered. The only thing is, I was wondering about the pathway, the gravel section of the pathway, the portion of it that's in the buffer zone. Does it have to be? Do you have to have quite that much clearing? 8-foot path with
Yeah.
cleared on either side? Is there some way to make it more consistent with the boardwalk width within the closest portion of the buffer zone there?
The only thing, Mary, is that I did a path in Concord, Mass one time that was along the Assabet River, and we were finding that we wanted to get a little bit wider with the clearing area to provide a comfort level for people walking side by side. If you're walking by yourself, that 5-foot width to be fine. Or if you're on a sidewalk that's open on both sides, no problem. But when you're walking through the woods, having that little bit of a vegetated shoulder on the sides, I think just provides you a little bit more comfortable feeling for some people that might be a little bit nervous walking through there, and for kids walking side by side, of course, on their
that just seems more like a
things like that.
driveway than a path. I mean, it's pretty wide. It's it's driveway width basically.
Well, 8 feet, yeah,
Plus
but
the-
only
plus the
5
clearing
of it is stone.
Clearing and grading beyond that as well, so it's pretty
Yeah.
wide.
That's a valid point. I mean, if the commission feels this, like I said, this is just based on my experience on other pathways. If the commission feels strongly about it, in addition to Mary, then I think that might be something we can revisit.
Yep.
And
So-
it will be allowed to kind of naturalize. It's not like it's going to be mowed or anything. It's not lawn or anything. You know what I mean? It's a kind of a meadow type look, probably. But anyway, we do have a turnout, a little that could have a bench or something at one point, which I think would be kind of cool. And so speaking of stone surface, I did want to talk about stormwater, because I know that's something that the planning board is kind of batting around right now. So, and Joe is going to be obviously looking at that. As we said in our narrative, these types of pathways are subject to the stormwater regulations to the maximum extent practicable. And that includes, considerations for, different competing factors and environmental benefits and things like that, regulatory compliance. We feel that, going with a permeable path here, crushed rock is going to allow recharge. It's going to, in fairness, engineers would argue that you are going to change the curve number a bit, so you will be getting a little more runoff off of that than you would off the woods, but it is a permeable surface. It's a stable surface, what we expect. So you're not going to be getting a lot of erosion from it. And we think that going, to have stormwater management facilities that would require additional clearing of, the buffer zone area is, frankly, we just don't feel it's needed or justified. And so that's the position that we've taken in our application and on our plan. But I guess we'll have to see what planning board says, because this is subject to a level 2 site plan review also. So, but we did make the same argument, if you will, in the planning board submission. So we're hoping that Joe will consider that. And so regarding maintenance, the pathway does.
Yeah, Mark, let me
go ahead.
stop you there if I could.
Absolutely.
Okay, let's go. Pete, any questions for Mark up to this point? You know, it is, we really look for a 10-minute presentation, cover all the high points and then respond to questions, but I'm watching the hour slip past 10. Pete, any questions for Mark at this point?
Not at this point. I've seen it in planning. Thanks.
Yep, okay. TJ, any questions for Mark up to this
Nope.
point?
Nope.
Diane, any questions for Mark up to this point?
One very quick one. If you're above like 15 inches above the wetland, what's the plan? Are you just going to be like cutting underneath of that? Because it could like grow through the walkway, right?
Yeah, the vegetation, Diane, in that area is very low lying. So I would not, looking at what's in there right now, I wouldn't anticipate that being a problem, but that's an interesting point. It's not like marsh grasses or anything like that.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, good question.
Mary, any other questions before I have Mark wrap up?
No,
No?
also,
Okay,
thank you.
okay. Mark, if you could wrap up your presentation, we'll do a final round of questions and see what the pleasure of the commission is.
Sure, just super quick, regarding maintenance, this pathway, will require some maintenance and, fixing divots, potholes, anything like that, making sure that the grading still complies with ADA requirements. And, the one thing that we added to the planning board's narrative, because this question was asked, Ben, and I'll touch on it for you folks, is that the Governor's Academy currently has a Conservation Commission approved buffer zone management plan. And that talks about walkways and their athletic fields and things like that. So what we'll do is, as a condition of approval, we can incorporate this work into their buffer zone management plan which would be an appropriate condition of approval for, Sam's review or whatever.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Mary,
welcome.
any wrap up questions for Mark?
In terms of your stormwater management, I had a similar project in another town and with a trail system, and they had the similar problem in complying with the stormwater management requirements, and they ended up taking a low spot in the alongside of the trail and creating a small rain garden and directing the grading towards a rain garden. So that met the requirement, so just keep that in mind. But I would say that if that, if additional stormwater management measures are required by planning board, then you'd have to come back to us for,
Understood.
more discussion on that, right? That's all.
Yep,
Thank you, Mary.
totally
Thank you.
understood.
Pete, any questions for Mark?
I'm good, thank you.
Okay, TJ, how about yourself?
Nope, all set.
Diane, any questions?
Oh,
So Mark, what's the status of your planning board? Where are you on your review process?
Yep,
I'm sorry
we-
if I missed that earlier.
Yeah, we submitted to the planning board we actually started that process before you folks, and we super quick, we submitted on March 1st, and then you have a preliminary application review. We then met with the planning board on the 15th, and they then accepted our application, which was then completed, with all the responses to the initial preliminary comments. And we've been scheduled for a public hearing for April 19th. So, which would be the day after your 2 public hearings in April of the commission. So we're anticipating that we would have comments back from Joe, maybe the week before that hearing on the 19th, but it's something we don't really have control over, but so I think
Would you
that
like to, are you gonna, what are you thinking to continue this public hearing until after April 19th, or just to keep your options open for additional?
to be frank, Mr. Chairman, I would not have an issue with the commission closing on the understanding with tonight, with if appropriate, with the understanding that if, as Mary said, that if there are any changes to the plans that result from planning board review, we'd have to come back to the commission. We have to accept that.
Just do either a minor or an amendment.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. And maybe, I think the commission, if I'm not mistaken, has 30 days to issue the order. So maybe we just hold off. Well, no, that wouldn't make sense, would it?
No, you
Yeah,
can.
we can't close the hearing and accept new information afterwards.
Okay. So
Oh,
Tim,
no, I understand that, Sam, but I was gonna say,
why don't I do this, Sam? Are there any raised hands from the public at this time?
There's no public at this time.
Yeah, we have a smart public here in the greater Newbury area. They go to bed early. All right, so team, what's our pleasure? Do we have any further questions or requests for information or plan modifications at this time? Mary, anything you wanna?
The only thing I had was the, the width of the path itself, if there is any wiggle room in that, but I may be the only one that is concerned about that. If that's the case, and one option is for us to just close the public hearing and have request that Sam draft an order of conditions for us to consider at the next meeting.
Okay, so Mark, as I recall, the particular path width that Mary raised a concern about was about 8 feet wide.
well, the path itself, Mr. Chairman, is 5 feet wide with 18 inches of
Okay, on each side.
like shoulder, if you will,
Yeah,
on the 2 sides. For
That's
a
the
total,
boardwalk.
right.
That's
say
the
that again, Mary? Say,
That's the boardwalk, but the stone pathway was wider, wasn't it wider
Nope.
in your,
no, it's 5 feet,
okay,
5 feet with 18-inch shoulders on each side.
Okay,
Okay,
so that's where the
alright.
8 foot, that's where the 8 foot.
okay,
appeared.
then I'm fine
Yes.
with that. I just misheard you then.
Okay, so do we have a motion to close the public hearing unless there's any further questions? Hold that motion. Pete, any questions before we consider closing the public hearing?
No, thank you.
TJ,
Nope.
Diane,
no,
okay. I don't have any questions either. So I'll entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
so
So
moved.
Okay, I'll take that as a motion in a second. Okay, roll call vote. All those in favor of closing the public hearing? Mary,
Yes,
Pete,
Yes,
TJ,
Yes.
Diane,
Yes.
and Bob Connors votes yes. All right, team, that comes down to, is there a motion to approve the order of conditions for the Middle Road?
So moved.
Okay, do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, all those in favor, say aye. Mary,
Yes, and with special conditions to be discussed at the next meeting. Yes.
okay.
Okay.
TJ,
Aye.
Pete,
Yes.
Diane,
Yes.
and Bob Connors votes yes. Okay, Mark, thank you.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And just a quick question, Mr. Chairman. If you're going to be discussing conditions at the next meeting, I know the hearing's closed, but would we be able to attend that meeting to hear the discussion?
Oh, it's a public meeting.
Okay,
Would be encouraged.
Yeah, be
Okay, good,
encouraged
good.
in it. Okay,
appreciate that.
all right, thank you. Sorry about the length of tonight's meeting. We're usually a little more efficient than we were tonight, but
Really nice job on the
Yeah.
application though, too.
Oh,
As
thank you
usual,
very much,
the
Mary. I
governors,
really
yeah.
appreciate that. That
And-
means a
and-
lot.
And the prelim was excellent too, Mark. It really, it answered certainly most of my questions.
Great. That's good to hear. Thank you very much. Happy to, of course, be working with governors. So good team effort.
Okay, have a good night.
Thank
All right,
you.
thank you, you too.
Thanks,
See you soon.
everybody.
Very much. Thanks, Mark.
All right,
Thank you,
team,
Sam.
we're not going to, there are no administration matters that we're
There,
going to
sorry,
discuss.
there is one thing, I promise it's quick. Some students from Newburyport High School are going to be doing a beach cleanup.
Okay,
There's no need for any permitting. It's gonna be going on the 7th, and it has been fully approved and discussed with the town administrator. They are all set with it. Just wanted to put that out there. They're gonna be starting at Plum Island Center and I believe moving north.
any shorebird nesting that we.
Any shorebird nesting?
Right, that they should
The
know
Plovers
about.
just arrived on the Cape,
Okay, so
Okay,
then,
so
Well,
they
that's
will be
the-
up here for probably a couple weeks.
okay, okay. All right.
Okay.
All right, well, is there a motion to adjourn?
Yes, please.
So
Yeah.
moved.
Okay,
Second.
Mary, Pete, TJ, Diane, and Bob Connors. all
100%,
Yes.
yes.
Unanimous.
Yes.
Hey, thank you, guys. It's been a challenging night, but appreciate y'all hanging in there.